said, sorry, I want to live to 45.
Live on YouTube.
All right.
Thank you for making me feel young, Will.
Rock and roll. You are young, Rob. Age is how you
I feel young.
Good.
I
Then
feel
you are.
young.
Tonight, we are young.
Mhm.
I just got a copyright strike.
I think my last few years, man, have been I felt my youngest. Petra did that for me. Yeah.
All right, so now I can still the.
What's up, all you beautiful people?
Linksy.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Y'all dingus.
We got a copyright strike.
Mute it, Rob.
Is it on me?
Somebody's got the volume on.
Oh, I got you. I thought he was being serious.
I love the starts of these and how awkward they are. I've really got to get down on making this more professional, where we get the like waiting screen and like the lobby, ahead of time, and making us look.
His buddy's hanging out.
Way cooler. Son of a gun! I closed the stupid Twitter, and I had the tweet ready to go, and just dumber than heck.
You're just heckin' dumb.
Heckin' dumb. I can't believe I did that. I am real bummed about that. Oh, well. What's up, you beautiful people? This is Gary Horn, and this is the NWA, the podcast celebrating the past, present, future, history, legacy, and tradition of the greatest pro wrestling entity of all time. We're talking about the National Wrestling Alliance, and it is Sunday night, which means another edition of the live show. This is the NWA After Dark, where all topics are on the table. The adults are in the room, and we're talking about the National Wrestling Alliance, and we're talking about wrestling. We're talking about life, love, mystery, desire, fantasy, whatever else. Not all of that stuff, but everything else. Mostly if it's about wrestling, that's what we're going to talk about today. If you got some other stuff, like Rob was trying to kick into high gear about some political stuff right before we kick this thing on live, not tonight, baby.
You don't have to do that to me, man.
We're talking wrestling.
You don't do that to me like that.
Anyway, that, by the way, is the good doctor, Dr. Rob Stinson. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks, guys. Glad to hang out tonight, man. We miss you guys. NWA fan for life. Doc McLovin.
There we go. And as always, with this, providing the levity and also professionalism, everything pretty much that the show relies on to succeed. That's hey, it's Will.Daily, Mr. Will Martin over there.
Thank you. I like to consider myself the Sting to Dr. Rob Stinson's Ric Flair.
Dude, hey, I appreciate that.
Oh yeah. Well, that just means we're gonna have a really good feud.
And I guess that Gary would be the El Gigante or the Paul Orndorff.
I was gonna go with RoboCop from Capital Combat, but yeah, sure.
Yeah. Bobby Heenan, maybe.
RoboCop. Oh man, I'd take Bobby Heenan 100%.
Yeah, who
that
would?
Guy, the Weasel, get gorilla pressed by the Ultimate Warrior while I'm in a weasel suit.
Perfect.
And, yeah, managing Mr. Perfect. You're right, Will.
Perfect.
Oh man, how are you guys doing tonight? It's good to see you. You guys talk amongst yourself while I send this damn tweet.
All right, I'm doing good. Hung out with the fam a lot this weekend. It was nice celebrating my 11-year-old's about to turn 12. So happy birthday to him on Tuesday. So fun times, man. Just hanging out with family, celebrating him, and just enjoying the weekend. But I'm glad to be here talking to you guys. I don't know about you guys. It feels like such a long gap between Tuesday and Sunday, right? Like, I know Rob's feeling me on that one.
Oh, I do, man. I feel like when Tuesday ends, it's like when Tuesday ends, like I'm over y'all. But then by Wednesday, I'm missing you. I'm like, why have these guys not texted me all day? What in the heck, man? They better. I'm like, they're gonna think I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy, am I? Tanya's like, you texted them like 80 times.
And it's 3 a.m. Come on.
Like, where are they at? They've not checked in.
My wife says the same thing. She's like, you guys are a bunch of schoolgirls, like talking to each other and then hanging out late. And I can hear you giggling in that room over there. Like, what are you guys talking about? Just wrestling.
I mean, we're live. She could come.
What are you wearing? Khakis.
Oh my God. Thanks to everybody in the chat who's there already. We love you guys for showing up. We see Dave Scooby. I see the lovely and talented Natalia Martin in the chat and WWE Front Row.
Beautiful.
Dr. Red Tyler is here watching, listening, waiting, as he does. You know that Red Tyler.
As are we.
Yes. Waiting for something nefarious, I suspect. Oh man, so lots going on. A lot going on in the wrestling world. I was going to bring up all the WWE COVID stuff, but I think that'll get Rob rolling. So I don't know if
we don't want to put him to sleep this early.
Why me?
Oh yeah, Rob doesn't really keep up. Rob, did you know everybody in the WWE, officially everyone, this breaking news, they all have COVID?
I think back to like the first season of The Walking Dead. Remember, I think it's like episode 6, and I stopped watching after that because it scared me. But they were in the CDC and they whisper in the ear, and we don't know what they whispered. Then we find out they whispered that we all have it. So I think we all have it, man.
Ooh, nothing like getting your facts from a fiction show.
Well, I mean, that's pretty much all of us, right?
Hey, I get my facts. I get my facts from Twitter. All right, that is a reputable news source.
Nah, it's it's crazy. We are seeing some more restrictions coming in place. You know, we had relaxed some things, and we went out today. Tanya and I went out to a restaurant, had a good meal, got some charbroiled oysters. If you've never had those, are amazing. But this is a restaurant we've been to a couple times, and we haven't had much by way of restriction until today. We went in and they were like doing the spacing and all that stuff. So there's definitely a spike, man.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I'm sure we'll get into it, like you mentioned, Gary. But I mean, when it comes to WWE, you can go back and watch the daily shows, but I have been openly critical about how they've handled it, and hate to be right on something like that, and definitely not the way I wanted to be right, but certainly seems like it's come to bite them in the butt there.
That's true, but before anybody was saying anything, you were on this show critiquing that.
Well, not before anybody. I mean, I was reporting on other articles that were out. Like, I didn't break any stories, but I mean, it just from the beginning, it rubbed me the wrong way, because I just felt like, you know, they should have taken it a little more seriously, whether they believed it was a legitimate threat or not. I think they should have been a little more respectful of their talent and staff. And, you know, I mean, just the fact that, you know, public knowledge, they didn't test anybody until like, you know, what, a week ago? And we're supposedly on the tail end of this thing. So they've been running weekly shows. I know they've been doing tapings. They haven't been taping every week, but they've been doing tapings with the talent. And then they've added in NXT enhancement talent to the crowd, and, you know, and all along not testing anyone. And, you know, then they want to act surprised when people come out. And I mean, you know, the Renee thing, you know, with her coming out and saying that she's got.
I was going to say, that's the one that's pissing me off.
Yeah, and it sucks, because I mean, now that's affecting AEW, obviously. You know, her being married to Jon Moxley, and you know, who knows if the Fyter Fest stuff that's going to happen. And I haven't been following that too closely, but just keeping up with the overall news when it comes to wrestling. But you know, he was supposed to have a match with Brian Cage, and you know, don't know if that's going to happen now. It's supposed to be recorded this week. So if he's, you know, unless he's been tested and cleared, or however that works, I don't know. But, you know, there's a lot of.
That's going to secretly like burn their butts, right? In AEW, that the WWE is just being so lackadaisical, about their testing.
Is that how it said? Lackadaisical.
Is that how it said? Yeah.
I've never
I just
heard that
did it very
Lackadaisical.
lackadaisical. I'm lacking any daisials in this whole conversation. That was a Rob joke. That was a straight up Rob joke, and I'm happy I did it.
I love it, man.
So, that was great.
But anyway, I'm just saying it's gotta burn their bridges that WWE is being so careless with their and it's like, you know, these wrestlers, they interact more than you even realize sometimes. Like, they know each other. Like, they're all working for different companies. And yeah, you've got some with relationships like Renee and John Moxley. And it's just like, she's subjected to all of this mess when, like, it seems like, I mean, you can argue all day long that they shouldn't be doing anything at all, period, especially right now in Florida. But if they're gonna, AEW seems to be taking the testing and policies way more seriously than WWE is. And so it's going to be very annoying that it's affecting them anyway.
I thought it was really funny too. How it came out, because if you followed the progression of everything, so it came out, I guess, a couple weeks ago that someone, they didn't say who, in the WWE had tested positive, and they had discovered this. And then, like, a few days later, Tony Khan made it known that John Moxley had reported to him that he had come in contact with someone who had come in contact. And we're all sitting there going, so that's Renee, obviously. And that's completely tied to, like, but it was like they couldn't just come out and say it. And then it was like, and then she came out as having it. And then everyone was like, oh, crap, what's about to happen? So yeah, it's a mess, man. It's just a mess.
The thing is, we have the tools, we have the knowledge now to beat this thing. It's like WWE Front Row and Dr. Red in the chat. Come on, guys. Let's have some common sense. We need to think beyond ourselves. We need to do what we got to do. Wear your mask out in public. They're not comfortable. Human beings are made to touch and engage and be in close proximity. We're made to do that. If we want to get back to that, we have got to do some common sense stuff, guys. Follow the guidelines, you know. This is not forever. It's temporary discomfort so that we can get back to power, so that we can get back to life as we know it, so that we can get back to full capacity restaurants and nightclubs and all that kind of stuff that I know Will loves and Gary loves and that I love. So come on, guys, let's be common sense here, man. Let's beat this thing. We're human beings. We know what to do to beat it. Let's do it and be done with it.
Well said. Just be smart. That's what I keep saying on the show. Just be nice, be smart. Like, you know, like, I mean, from a business level for WWE, like, why would you wait this long? I mean, you're a giant company. You've got all the resources. Like, just test your people. Make sure that people are safe. Like, it doesn't hurt anyone to test them. You know, like, just do it.
Yeah, and it's that same way with the mask. I just don't get, like, if everybody's kind of coming together to say, like, this is the best idea, just if you're saving somebody, like, I mean, there's a chance you are. I mean, I guess is what I'm saying. So, like, just it's a minor inconvenience to potentially do a lot of good. So I don't get what the argument's about with it. But anyway,
I heard it put best the other day. I was listening to a podcast. I think it was Sean Ross Sapp, and he said at best, you're slowing the spread of a deadly disease. At worst, you're a little bit uncomfortable. Like, it should not be this, like, political splitting, nation dividing issue. Like, no, that kind of put it in perspective.
And it's not, I mean, you know, obviously this cuts across the grain, but this is not a Republican Democrat issue, man. There are people all across the spectrum that are on board with this and with the task force and Dr. Fauci and all these other things. Come on, guys, let's beat this. We are the human race. We got this, man. We can do it. We just got to band together as a people and finish this thing off, man, so we can get back to life.
It's well said, Rob.
Will's already got his mask on.
Well said. I'm with you on that. Let's do this.
I legitimately almost wore a mask.
It was like,
I love Rob wearing his shirt, like the After Dark sign, like, sometimes appears glowing through your chest. That's pretty impressive. I don't know why it's not doing it now, but I swear to God, it just did it. I'm not making that up.
I think it's
All right. So we're going to.
Yeah. Adjust this here. I feel like I need to see more of my face.
What is happening?
I don't know. He's drunk.
No, I don't get drunk. Is that better? Yeah.
No, now it looks like you were doing the Jesus image, like you had like glowing around your head.
Oh man.
More.
Yeah, that's perfect.
You know what, Will?
What are you looking off over to the side, Rob? Is it the same thing you were looking at earlier? Do we need more viewers? Like,
I bet you I can distract you tonight. It's like, bet you can't. I'm a professional.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, let's talk about some other news that's out there. The big one, I guess, in this, well, all right. So let's knock this one out. We heard the news this week and we have tried to be like cool about it and not be speculative or anything, but Zicky Dice is gone from the NWA. That is a fact. As far as we know, it was reported by Fightful.com. Fightful.com reported that first. And that Zicky had asked for his release, according to reports. Also in that article, all talent was offered an option to leave at this point if they wanted to leave the NWA. Thus far, all we've heard of is Zicky Dice leaving. I don't know. I kind of looked at that information like, all right, well, fair enough. You know, like they're giving him an out. Some people want to get back to work. Obviously, a guy like Ricky Starks wanted to get back to work. He's down in AEW now. Zicky Dice, obviously unhappy. And for whatever reasons, and he's moving on from the company now, which is a real bummer because he's the television champion. Somebody asked me the other day, they said they had heard, I was on Putting You Over with the Standing Streamer on his Twitch channel. And he was saying he had heard a rumor that Zicky was getting to keep the TV title. And I was like, I don't think that is going to be a thing. I can't imagine how that would ever happen. But anyway, so that means it's vacant, I suppose. But did you guys have any immediate thoughts on Zicky Dice leaving the NWA?
It's a tough one to swallow, man. We like Zicky. Zicky's been on Piper's Notes before, and he brings a lot of color and personality. But people got to do what they want to do and what they think is going to further their career. And I think everybody in the NWA has that mindset that we're not going to hold anybody back from trying to further themselves. And there are a lot of people that want to work and they look around in the world and see this dark show and this dark show going on. And that's just not where we're at right now as a company in the NWA. We've talked about doing dark arena events. Power won't be like that, but I think there's just some, I can't fault anybody. People got to do what's best for them. I wish the best for Zicky. I appreciate his time in the NWA. And he's always been kind to us. I wish he would stay because I think this is one of those things where this is a marathon, not a race. And you've got to be very, very foresighted. You got to have a long distance vision here. And I think more people need to have that. If we would be more patient and let things kind of play out, I think the NWA is where everybody's going to want to be. And I think, guys like Ricky Starks and Zicky Dice at some point are going to want to be back in the NWA because it is the best thing going. It has the best vision. It has the best leadership. And but all that notwithstanding, I wish the best for him. I like Zicky, so I appreciate his service.
Yeah, and it was obviously hard news to hear, especially just during this hiatus and restructurings going on. But as you said, Gary, I understand it. Like, he wants to get back to work, and I saw an interview with him a few months back, and it seemed pretty apparent that he had his sights set past NWA, which again I can't fault him for. The NWA is our preferred promotion, but for a lot of guys and girls, it is a stepping stone, and I'm not going to fault him for that. I appreciate the time that he had, just the same stuff we said when we found out Ricky had left, and wished him nothing but the best. And it is tough because he was a current champion. I did see WWE Front Row asked when they interviewed him, he said he had won the title without the contract, is it possible they let him hold it? I don't think so, because I heard him mention that as well. And he was saying that he did win it before he was under contract, but then since then he was in a contract. And so I would imagine the clause of him being released from that contract is that he would have to relinquish the title. But I don't know all the legal stuff behind it. But I mean, this is just one of those things that, in light of everything going on, the pandemic, the changes in the leadership, executive leadership, I think personally, I think the NWA is doing the right thing, according to that article, that they, kind of put it out to everyone. Hey, we're going to restructure and move forward. If you're not all in for that, then this is your chance to step out of whatever agreement you have with us and go, do your own thing. And I feel like that was a respectable and right thing to do, just to make sure that, once this restructuring is complete and NWA sets back out on whatever path that they're going on, they know that they're doing so with a full roster of committed talent. And I think that's what they're going to get to. So, as we've said before, Zicky, we wish you well. We're gonna, as an NWA fan, we're gonna root for him wherever he ends up, wherever we see him next, and continue to put him over. But we're sad that we won't be seeing him anymore holding that belt. So.
Yeah, and there's always an opportunity. They say never in the wrestling business. I think it's okay for us to say we've heard rumblings. Like, I think this is a pretty steadfast cut from the NWA right now. Like he has other plans, or maybe not other plans, but no plans with the NWA for the foreseeable future, and they don't have any intention of using him right at this point. So he's we're likely to see Zicky somewhere else before back in the NWA, but you never know, I guess.
And the thing too, Gary, is like you gotta the NWA has a certain vision and a perspective, and we, in order for that to really take root and prosper, we need everybody to be on board with that. And if you're not on board with it, that doesn't mean you're horrible or terrible or anything like that. It just means that, that's not the way you see things, and that's not the way you view your career taking route over the next few months and years. But we want people in the NWA that buy into the vision. And when we have those kind of personnel, you're going to have stars emerge. You're going to have people come and go. That's how pro wrestling's always been. But the NWA is on sound footing. And it's Will said yesterday or the day before, we're not going anywhere, man. The NWA has been through hurricanes. It's been through FBI investigations. It's been through this and that. Personnel losses is a thing that happens, and it's going to be okay. And the NWA will be back strong. We saw our champ tweet last night, a very encouraging word that our patience and our steadfastness is going to be rewarded. And, Zicky Dice leaves, but another one comes in and fills his place. And the NWA is on solid footing.
Yeah, I would say just for anybody who mentioned it or missed it, if you haven't seen it, the champ did tweet last night to the hashtag NWA fam. Thanks, champ. That's what we're calling our community now. We're happy to have like a name for it. And he says, I'm not going to lie, it's been a difficult week. I still love this business, and I love the NWA. Our fans are second to none. You've all trusted the brand and what we represent, and that trust is going to be rewarded. Thank you all. So a short, to the point message from the champ, but a very encouraging one, to use exactly what Rob said. I think that's the champ trying to send out a little bit of light into the darkness that a lot of fans are feeling about the NWA right now, just telling you that there is still a glimmer of hope for the NWA. It is not gone. It is not dead. There is restructuring going on, and we can confirm here from everything that we've heard as well. We're very excited about the restructuring that is going on in the NWA right now, and we expect to hear, honestly, more on that in a few days. So, and this may be the first taste of that. So I can't tell you anything specifically, obviously, but, Rob, Will, and I have heard that there's some encouraging things, I guess. So we'll have to just wait and see.
Yeah, and just the the perspective and reality of all this is the NWA from the beginning. From the beginning of the current, William Patrick Corgan NWA, has set out to be different than other wrestling promotions, and that's okay. The reality is that appeals to some people and it doesn't appeal to other people. It obviously appeals to us. That's why we are diehard NWA fans and you guys watching and listening. But there's plenty of wrestling promotions out there and different opportunities, and these guys are employees. They're talent. They are they're working. This is their job. And so people are going to come and go, but I believe that the way and the vision of the NWA is to be a place where guys can come in like that, the same way that we talked about when Ricky Starks left. Was he's going to go on and he's going to be a superstar, and he's doing it, and we're going to see a lot more of that. So it stings, but at the same time, it's a reminder that the NWA is doing what it set out to do. Some people are going to come in and they're going to find out that it's not the place for them because they want to be in a WWE or an AEW or something. And NWA is not going to become another copy and paste of wrestling promotions that already exist. They're going to be their own entity. And because of that, this kind of stuff is going to happen, and it's going to sting a little bit at first, but after the restructuring and relaunch and we move on, it's going to be a distant memory.
I agree, Will. And this is just another bump in the road. That's how I'm looking at it also. WWE Front Row also brought up a great point in our chat. If you are a Patreon member of Carneyland, there was an update today on that. Seeming to have the understanding that obviously everybody's going to stick around for the Patreon thing. They're already having to let us know that they're not going to have the talent calls this month. And that's unfortunate news. But in place of that, they have decided to send out an exclusive piece of merchandise to everybody that's a Patreon member. So they're trying to make good on everything that they can to offer. And Maureen is the one sending out this message. And she says that they hope to have more news in the next little bit on exactly what it means for Patreon and the town council and everything else as far as regarding the Carneyland, but it seems like she's also waiting for clarification. And I know that could be disappointing, by the way. I mean, just to not know what to expect, but that's part of having faith in the company at this point, or believing in the people behind it, because it just is one of those things that nobody saw coming. This is not something anybody could have prepared for. There was no contingency plan in an event like this. I'm sure that, not to get into the weeds on it, but, with the guy like Lagana being gone, Lagana was expected to probably be one of the main pieces of this puzzle in the 20-year plan for the NWA. So understandably, when you get a big hole in the group like that, it's going to take some scrambling and picking up the pieces, basically. And it's unfortunate, but I feel strongly that this core group of people can pull it together. And it's nice to see them being able to finally toss out some information to acknowledge that they are working on it.
Right. And if you are a Patreon member, let me encourage you. And again, people have their own finances, and I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money, but stay the course, guys. If you're, we're not getting the personalized content this month, but they're sending us out an exclusive piece of merchandise. I mean, they're trying to make things right with us, but NWA has always been a grassroots movement, and it changed the world and it changed the landscape of pro wrestling over the last couple of years. Stay the course, guys. If you're a Patreon, don't, consider continuing to do that and continuing to support the NWA financially through them and through other outlets that elevate the NWA, like This Is The NWA, through our website and our store and all that kind of stuff. Again, we're all in this, we're all on the same page, and to the extent that we can sustain the NWA during this time and make sure that it continues to be what it always has been, which is the greatest pro wrestling entity to ever exist. That's to our benefit and to our credit and to the credit of the NWA. So if you're a Patreon, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your money, because money's tight, especially in these times, but consider being steadfast and resolute and hanging on and continuing to support this amazing, amazing organization.
Absolutely agreed. Couldn't have said it better, Rob. And for what it's worth, on another side piece of news involving Carneyland, according to Twitter, her personal Twitter, Thunder Rosa is claiming victory of the Carneyland mayoral race. So take that for what it's worth. Nobody else is doing it, so I don't know if that means by default she's won or, but there you go.
I mean, I would
Sal
say
Renaro was the only one out there actively campaigning on the streets, though, to like engaging the public.
Well, I didn't even know he was in the race.
I think he was trying to get that ride-in slot.
Okay. Between him and Josephus.
Josephus, by the way, if you're out there, Rob is worried about you. So show back up. He's concerned.
He needs to hear from you.
He's probably going to be upset with me that I haven't said anything, but he was mentioning he was concerned.
Out there for the whole world. You put that out there for the whole world to hear, didn't you? No, I just love Josephus, man, and I'm he doesn't chime in a lot, but when he does, it means something. And it's been a little bit since we've heard from him, and I miss me some Josephus, man. That's I love Nick Aldis. I think what he's doing is uniquely historical, but people, my really close friends like Will and Gary and Tanya and all them, they know that Josephus has been my favorite personality in the NWA for a long, long time, and I miss him and want to hear from you, man.
But in terms of Thunder Rosa, I mean, like unless Tim Storm pipes in and claims victory, I mean, I think you got to give it to her. If he pipes up and says that no, he thinks that he should be, then I think we just got to have a vote between the two of them, because those were the two front runners in my mind for the mayor.
I can't act like I'm not going to sit here and act like I know everything that goes on everywhere. But let me just say right off the bat too, up top, that we could not in this time, this dark time in wrestling, could not have two better leaders / champions in the NWA than we do right now with Thunder Rosa and Nick Aldis. Like, I feel like I know it sounds like blowing smoke, but those two, like Thunder Rosa on the public side of things, especially, is active, excited, announcing, streaming, making stuff, just doing things. Like, she is keeping people engaged. She just popped in on this chat just randomly, just because, and was very passionate. If you go back and listen to that episode, she's very passionate when she spoke. And then, like I said, I can't speak to everything, but I can assure you that Nick Aldis is there too. He sent the words of encouragement, but you got to kind of consider that probably this is a guy who is the cornerstone, the tentpole for the company. Like, he's the guy. And so who's the guy that's going to have to pick up slack right now when things are falling down? Who's carrying the company? Who started with carrying the company at the very beginning of the modern era? It was Nick Aldis. And so I assure you that guy is probably out there doing the exact same thing right now, maybe in places you can't see every single day. But these two are champions in and out, or up front and behind the scenes. Like, they're there and they're working to make the NWA stay relevant and stay active. And so just wanted to give a shout out to those guys. Like, they are, I cannot imagine any two other talents, and that's not taking anything away, but can you imagine, like, if WWE started falling apart at the seams, I don't know that they could have had two champions as great as these two that would just keep this promotion alive on their own, just doing what they do. So
I think that
anyway,
every other champion out there in any promotion, and we believe in sport of professional wrestling here on this show, whether you're an Impact, Ring of Honor, WWE, AEW, AWF, whatever, Smoky Mountain, whatever, we believe in pro wrestling. And the NWA is the wellspring of all that. And if you're a champion out there, if you aspire to be, you need to look at what Nick Aldis and Thunder Rosa do and how they conduct themselves. And I think Will and I talked this a week ago or two, maybe, about Eli Drake and how he fits into that. A world champion of a credible promotion is not just a wrestler, but a head of state, a corporate or an organizational head of state. You owe something to your public. You owe something to the community. Whether you're a heel or a baby, that's irrelevant. I mean, I think Chris Jericho does this phenomenally with his podcast and with his show, all the things that he's always posting about what he does in the community. Thunder Rosa's out there working in soup kitchens. She's working in a homeless shelter. She's an activist. She believes in the world and her community around her. Nick Aldis is doing things that we don't even know behind the scenes. But also, I've got a guy that on an episode of Piper's Notes that's coming out here in a couple of weeks, a young, amazing talent that you guys are going to hear about. His name is Alex Taylor, and he's one of them Tennessee boys, along with Crimson and those guys. And we were just talking yesterday. We were doing some filming at one of the local shows, and he came up and said, "Yeah, I was up at Tried and True with Tom Latimer and Camille." And Nick Aldis walks in and just starts educating everybody, just being very considerate and very, he came in and assumed the authority and began to just very humbly begin to teach people and point things out, not charging anybody, wasn't selling lessons, just being the world champion. And if you are a champion or aspire to be a champion, look no further than Nick Aldis and Thunder Rosa, because they get it. They are not just world champions of wrestling. They are organizational heads of state. They are figureheads, and they understand that they owe something and they belong to the public. And I agree with you, Gary. You could not find two better people. Now, I think someone like an Allison Kay could have done that and would have, no doubt. But we are blessed. We are hashtag blessed to have our champions represent us. And I would not want them, or I wouldn't want our championships, the 10 pounds of gold or the Burke, in any other hands right now than those two.
Love the way you flipped that hashtag the Burke. I don't know if that's a real good hashtag, but we'll stick with hashtag NWA fam and hashtag gravy cake for now. But Rob's promo there was gravy cake, if you're curious what that means. So very good, Rob. All right. And one other piece of news I guess we should hit on since it's out there. And if there's anything else, you guys can let me know. But Tessa Blanchard has been let go from Impact and is no longer stripped of the world championship and just no longer with the company. Kind of a weird turn of events, I felt like, just because, first female heavyweight champion, like just overall heavyweight champion in a company like that. And it's not quite the way I imagined her reign ending, but there it is. Thoughts on Tessa and what might happen and how do we feel about the potential for Tessa Blanchard in the NWA, I guess, just to make it relevant?
I don't see her in the NWA, and that's not a knock on her. That's just a realization, just looking at all the information that we have that, reportedly, and we don't know the facts, so we're just talking about what's been reported, but she was very tough to work with there in the last little bit, and I just don't think the NWA is interested in adding someone that's tough to work with, especially right now, to the roster. So just to answer that question, but I've heard this a lot. I think she's 24, right? I mean, she's young. Hopefully, my hope, because she is an incredible talent. She's got all the potential in the world to be, one of the greatest, not just female wrestlers, but wrestlers of all time. And I have to hope that this is a growing experience for her, and whatever happens moving forward, she matures and can be a welcomed addition to wherever she lands. I just think it's unfortunate that this had to happen this way, because it does feel like a little bit of a black mark on everything she's accomplished and the way she's elevated women in pro wrestling in the last few years. And so again, I hope it ends up all right. I understand why Impact made the decision that they did, just based on all the information that's out there. I just hope at the end of the day, when a few years from now, we're talking about her in a different light, because she's definitely got the potential to be a game changer in the industry.
I don't know a lot about the circumstances like any of us do. I mean, I've read different things, and obviously she was mentioned in the Speak Out movement. We've heard grumblings about her being difficult to work with, even from our own former world champion, Allison Kay, who I do respect a lot. And her words for me mean a lot. I've also heard that this wasn't really related to that. It was more related to traveling and appearance type things. I'm also concerned with Impact, and not because I'm a huge Impact fan. I like Impact, but I'm concerned that they're very clumsy with the way that they deal with their championship. This is not the first world champion in Impact to leave under inauspicious circumstances. This seems to be a pattern for them, and they've got to figure that out. But again, to Will's point, she's 24. She's young and immature. She's got a lot of growing up to do. I don't think that Allison Kay would put things out there for the public to hear that aren't true, and don't at least cause for some self-reflection. I think Tessa's okay. She's a talent. She's not the best talent though. She's not a Thunder Rosa. She's not an Allison Kay. And do I see her working in the NWA? Not now. She's got some growing up to do before I think she'd be welcome here. I think she's got some fences to mend. But on the other side, I believe in redemption. I think that everybody should have a place to repair things and apologize and to fix things in their own lives. I mean, God knows I know how dark my own sins in my heart is. I know that. I mean, I'm not here to sit in judgment on anybody. And I want anybody who can reflect on themselves and reflect on their decisions and their choices, who can do so and make themselves better. We're only going to get better as a community and as a nation if we start to allow people room to grow. You made mistakes, and I'm not saying accept the mistakes. I'm not saying that. When mistakes happen, especially when they're very egregious, they need to be repudiated. But we have to make room in our lives for people to grow and mature and to bring them along. Gary and I were talking, maybe it was me and Will, or maybe we've had this conversation all together before, but one of the things I really love is those Medea movies, man. I love Tyler Perry and his message, because you ever watch those Medea films? The absolute worst character in those movies always gets redeemed. And I'm a huge believer in redemption. So I want people to do well. I want people to succeed. I want people to be positive and to benefit the greater community. So I hope the best for Tessa Blanchard. I don't feel this is the time for her to be in the NWA. I think she's got a lot of growth and maturing to do. But if she ever gets to that point and is able to repair relationships and to reflect on herself, man, she's a great talent. But we got Thunder Rosa and Allison Kay, so we're just fine in the NWA.
Yeah, I think, for what it's worth in Tessa's defense, I guess, according to Uncle Dave Meltzer, feelers have been sent out from the WWE already to her. Front Row in the chat mentions also she can always use this to her advantage and say she was never defeated for the championship. So she has that going for her. Front Row says he's actually met Tessa a few times and she was very nice, but obviously he's never worked with her. So always interesting to see that kind of stuff. Let's see, what else was I looking at in the chat there? Oh yeah, Ken G points out that her father works for AEW, so there's also that. So yeah, always those things. Guys, I guess let's make it a little bit lighter though with Tessa. And a lot of stuff we could be talking about in the wrestling world. We have a new website. It's thenwapod.com. If you guys haven't been there already, you got to go check it out. Our boy Will here designed the whole website himself, so we got to give props to Will. It looks amazing. I personally, not trying to drag anybody here, but I think it looks better than the NWA's own official website. But there it is. It's out there. And of course, with the NWA pod comes .com comes the NWA pod shop. And so you guys can go there right now and you can buy hashtag NWA fam merch. More than just that. But with the hashtag NWA fam merch, we decided that'd be a good way for everybody to be able to represent the brand and the community and that sort of thing. And because we want it to be more about that, more about the community than just us here, the Bearded Trio, we thought it'd be real gravy cake if we knocked those prices all the way down to basically cost. I'm not going to lie to you here. I mean, we're making like a couple bucks off of them, but really that's just because I had to pay like $160 because everybody else was a cheapskate to get the website up and running. So you're helping pay me back. So no, I'm just
Rob's
losing
a lot of money on this right now. So go get those t-shirts.
Yeah, you have to set up a PayPal account to use the shop, and so we just went with Rob's. So, poor guy. So anyway,
I have most expendable income. So my wife, my beautiful wife Tanya, who's interrupting me continuously tonight, she comes in. She's like, "Man, what's all these charges on our credit card?" I'm like, "Look, don't ask me about my business, all right?" No, I did not say that. I did not say that. But we're good, man. We're good. Come get your stuff. Come get your gravy cake, man. We got more stuff coming out next month. This month we're running exclusive at cost prices for hashtag NWA fan merchandise. We want to get everybody in the fan community wearing this stuff, and we really are making minimal money off this. We're basically giving it to you for free. You're looking at $13, something like that per shirt, which is I think we're paying $12 for it. So get it, man. Show your love. We're going to up the prices next month when we come out with gravy cake and bearded trio merchandise and band tees and all that kind of stuff. But right now, while the going gets hot, and before our champions are wearing it, get that stuff on there, man.
It's worth mentioning also too that we'll set up a nice little thing there that if you guys are interested and you like hanging out in the live chats and you want to just help support us just for the heck of it. Nobody's going to twist your arm. Like I said, there's merch out there that you could do that with, but we do have the opportunity to set up for contributions through the website, basically almost like a Patreon, no special perks like right this second, but you can just buy us a beer right there. You can do a one-time donation right there on the NWApod.com. So if you want to, you're feeling what Rob's putting down today, you could just toss $3 his way. Just go right in there, do a one-time donation, and that's all you got to do. So we appreciate all of you guys. Obviously, we're not going to sit here and just like beg you for money or anything, but it would behoove us to mention to you that you do have an option if you like helping pay for this stuff, because it ain't free. We love doing it, but it's always nice. And I'm also getting used to being Danny Deals now.
I'll add to that from the technical side of things. There's a lot of enhancements and improvements we want to make to what we do for you guys. And so some of that will go a long way towards us being able to upgrade things like Rob's green screen. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I mean, we appreciate it. At the end of the day, I mean, we're laying all that out for you, but at the end of the day, we made the strategic decision to really spotlight the NWA fam merchandise, because we exist not to put ourselves on a platform, but to elevate and celebrate the National Wrestling Alliance. So we're always going to have NWA fam stuff front and center, just to elevate the brand and to make that our focal point. But wanted to let you know about those opportunities if you feel so led.
Yeah, and everything's not always with. I mean, if you want to support the podcast and the show, like, you can easily just make sure you've hit subscribe. Tell other people to come to the YouTube channel and hit subscribe there. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Those subscriptions, the more likes and subscriptions and those kind of things we get, especially on YouTube and places like Spotify, it helps us get in front of more people. And that's really the idea, is to spread the love of the hashtag NWA fam, to build this community so we're all surrounded by passionate people for this product, and we can help build our favorite wrestling brand up. Also, that said, you can also help us out by going to manscaped.com. Offer code NWAPod gets you 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. I went to the pool earlier today, and this is after dark, right? So I was in there and I was wearing the bathing suit, and it's just got that netting in there, but I was getting caught every once in a while. I was like, oh yeah, I got to take care of this. But luckily I have the Lawnmower 3.0. And so go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, talk more about the netting. I'm interested.
Now it is very Rob's awkward. Oh, shout out
But here's the
WWE
thing.
Front Row. I just want to throw this in there. He just set up a monthly contribution through the
Nice.
website. So thank you so much,
Oh,
Front Row.
man.
That's it's very
Nice.
sweet of you, brother.
Well, hey,
thank you. We
So, let me
really
tell
do
you,
appreciate it.
this guy right here, you want to talk about key members of the NWA fam, you got to think about Sandoval, right? You got to think about, obviously, Gary Horn. He's one of the architects. He brought me into this. You got to think about WWE Front Row, man. He's been there since well before the Power Days. He's been in half of the 10 pounds of gold public, broadcasts. He's been to all the pay-per-views. If you ever want to meet WWE Front Row, and you ought to, and I just saw him. We didn't actually get a chance to talk when I was there, but WWE Front Row is good people. This guy he is on the Mount Rushmore of NWA fans. He's on there, man. So thank you.
Yeah, and shout out to everybody who's using that hashtag NWA fam thing. I see Chad Reese in the live chat talking about he's been encouraging people to use that in their tweets and everything else. That's all part of it, man. It builds up the community. So we appreciate anything you could do like that. That's super important. Dave Scooby, by the way, in the chat is requesting a Dr. Robert Stinson t-shirt.
Just wait. Just wait. They're coming.
Nice.
They're
I'm
coming.
gonna get you, man. I got you.
Well, hey, to round out this sales portion of the chat, I will say, I don't know if you were going to mention this, but we are going to be giving away a T-shirt, or if you've already bought a T-shirt, another piece of NWA fan merchandise over the next week. We haven't decided on exactly. I'm thinking a week, but if you go sign up for the email list. If you go sign up for the email list, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, just put your email in, click submit. We're going to take all of those email addresses that are submitted, pick one of those, give away a free piece of merchandise. So go get in on that and get a chance to get something for free.
Yeah, pass that out to people. Let them know. Just sign up for the email list. It's real simple. You put your name and your email, you're in, and you're automatically entered into a drawing for a free piece of hashtag NWA fam merch. Very good, Will. I almost forgot about that. And all right, so all of that gravy cake out of the way, let's get on to tonight's topic, unless you guys have another piece of news you want to discuss.
Nope.
Right.
Baseball's coming back. Next topic.
Rob.
I love baseball, man. That's one of my big three guys. I love baseball. So
I feel like I'm gonna fall back in love with baseball because of Rob. Like, because Rob loves baseball so much. It's like it makes it that contagious thing.
Just one quick thing, and then I won't tear you on this, but I want to say, like, I love rock and roll, baseball, and wrestling, man. They're, and I have other passions, but those are my big three. If anybody knows me, they know that. But what's neat to me is, like, all of these passions are rooted in ghost stories, all of them. We're not quite sure where wrestling began. We're not quite sure where baseball began. We're not quite sure where rock and roll began. You got the Crossroads story, with Robert Johnson. You've got the Carney stories with George Hackenschmidt and those wrestling on the farms and traveling beforehand. You've got, cricket and lacrosse and other, rounders and other sports. They're all rooted in mystery. And I think that's part of the charm. They're all the same, man. They all affect the same human interests and stuff. That's why I love them so much. But anyway, that's it.
All right, perfect. Will, do you have anything to say about baseball before we get going?
No, I'm not specifically about baseball, but if you did not go watch Friday's episode of Hey, It's Will Daily and see Rob's story about what he was just talking about, I had to send a group text. I mean, he sent that to me because, I've put a call out to everyone, and thanks to everyone who submitted your NWA story videos. But Rob sent me his, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't watch it immediately. Sorry, Rob. It took me a few days after you sent it. But then I finally sat and when I was editing the show together, watched it in full, and man, I was almost in tears. So if you want to get inspired about NWA, baseball, and rock and roll, go watch Friday's episode of Hey, It's Will Daily, because man, that'll inspire you. So go check that out. I've gotten a lot more submissions over the weekend, so this week will be really good with some NWA stories, and it's just been a lot of fun. I hope you guys have enjoyed that. because it's just been a good reminder to me that the NWA fam is made up of individuals who all have different stories, who all have different passions, different gifts when it comes to their love for wrestling. And then there's guys like Rob who love wrestling and some other things in relation, and they intersect, and it just creates a cool dynamic of looking at this hashtag NWA fam as a bunch of individuals who are like-minded when it comes to professional wrestling, but we're all from different places, different walks of life, and we intersect at this really cool thing called the National Wrestling Alliance. And so that's the feeling that I want to create with the daily shows for the next little bit. So if you haven't sent in your story and you want to, just send me a 3 to 5 minute video clip, whatever format, doesn't matter if you hold your phone upwards or sideways or whatever, none of that matters. We'll make it work. Whatever you feel comfortable doing, and just send that to heyitswill@gmail.com, and would love to feature your story. I think it's been, like I said, I hope you guys have enjoyed it, but I think it's been a really fun way to look at what's going on right now, and just to remind us of the family and the community that we have created here.
I'm pretty happy with all of it. Everything I've seen, it's by far one of my favorite things that's ever shown up on the channel, and I'm not in any of it, at least not yet. But eventually, I gotta make a video.
I'm still waiting on your video.
Well, I was gonna make a video, but I was planning on doing it this weekend, and then now I lost my phone. I guess I could do it right here, but this is really the first time I've been in this room since this weekend started. All right, so today, everybody, you're here. Well, we're all here for the same reason, NWA love, but we decided, well, what do you do when you don't have any new NWA content? And so we've been trying to decide like new ideas. We did a poll the other day, which was a lot of fun, where factions won, and we talked about all of the factions. I think, God help us if it wasn't like every wrestling faction in wrestling. But this week, credit where it's due, Doc Stinson gave us a great idea, because it's something we didn't even realize yet, but we are coming up on the 30th anniversary of the Great American Bash 90. And that was a huge event. It's considered one of the greatest NWA pay-per-views or wrestling pay-per-views of all time. So that will be next Tuesday. And we thought, well, we could talk about that pay-per-view right now, but wouldn't it be better? What if we could just talk about what went into that pay-per-view, particularly in the main event of that show, which featured Sting versus Ric Flair. And I was going to say spoiler alert, but I guess that doesn't really matter right now. This was a big moment because it was Sting's first NWA championship win. And so he beat Ric Flair in that match. And it was a huge moment in wrestling history, because this was also one of the greatest feuds of all time. So, I mean, I think you can look anywhere, and Sting and Flair is going to come up as like one of the most like long-lasting, just intense feuds between people, just a storied rivalry between those two guys. And so this was a big part of it. So we wanted to kind of jump in with like a retrospective on a little bit about Sting and about Flair, where they were at this point in time and what was happening leading into the Great American Bash. I guess now is as good a time as any to say also what we're planning on doing is we'll do this retrospective like leading up to the Great American Bash, and plan on discussing the Great American Bash next Tuesday on its anniversary. But in the middle of this, we're thinking tomorrow, if you want, we decided to go head to head with Monday Night Raw, and we're going to have a cast watch party for the Great American Bash 1990. So if you guys are available, the Cast app is absolutely free. You can get it on your phone, on your desktop, on your tablet, wherever you want. It's just KAST, Cast app. We'll tweet about it. And you just join the NWA group, and we'll be streaming the show right there for you to watch. The whole pay-per-view in its entirety, there for you to watch. There's a little chat, just like on the YouTube shows when the NWA launches something. And we can all chat, have a good time, hang out, have a beer on a Monday night if you want to. I don't know. I don't want to pressure you, but we can all watch the Great American Bash 1990 together. And I think that'll be fun. And then next week, we'll come back and actually discuss the pay-per-view itself as the hashtag NWA fam community. And I think that'll be a good idea. Did I say all of that right, Will?
You did. You failed to mention that this may be the beginning of the new Monday Night Wars. And we just thought we will be tracking viewership, and we'll go head to head with Monday Night Raw and see how we stack up.
All right. I can't wait. I think we can take them. Whoever's giving us thumbs down in the YouTube world, stop it.
Yeah, just leave.
Pissing Rob off. Yeah, that's a really good point. Why don't you just go away?
Yeah,
world's got enough negativity. In it.
Scroll, man. We're just guys hanging out talking wrestling. If you don't want to be here, fine. Don't hurt us by giving us thumbs down, man. Jeez.
There you go. So we're excited about the Great American Bash. 30 years, man. That's crazy. I posted a thing about it in Facebook, and people were like sending me. I saw pictures of people's tickets for being at the event and that sort of thing. Like that's really cool. And a lot of people, or at least a couple in Facebook, were even saying like greatest wrestling show I've ever attended. And so that's exciting. So we're going to be watching that tomorrow night if you guys are down. And you can just DM one of us or at the NWA Pod too if you have any questions about the Cast app or how to use it. But it's pretty simple. And all you got to do is have the app, create a login, and join the room. And it's there. It'll be just playing. And you can watch the thing. All right. And so what we're going to do now is jump right in. I've got an outline here. I'm going to run through some factoids about the Great American Bash 1990, and these guys are going to help me out. But let's talk a little bit about it. Basically, this was the 6th annual Great American Bash wrestling pay-per-view ever produced by World Championship Wrestling. At this time, this was, of course, World Championship Wrestling, but it was in they were going together with the National Wrestling Alliance. They were still a part of the National Wrestling Alliance at this point, although we're getting pretty close to the time that separation occurred. It took place on July 7th, 1990, at the Baltimore Arena in Baltimore, Maryland. And this featured a lot of cool stuff, and there's a lot of cool matches. I'm just going to read through the lineup here for those of you who don't know. And let's start with the dark match because I just want to see if Doc Stinson can shed any light on this. It is David Sierra versus Mr. X. Stinson, do you know anything about David Sierra and or Mr. X?
So all the dark matches back in those, I remember, I don't know if you guys used to buy the VHS tapes. This is well before DVDs and all that. But I actually liked David Sierra, man, because he was one of those Latin luchador, pre-luchador wrestlers before all of the influx and the into Nitro and all that kind of stuff. And he was known as the Cuban Assassin later on. I mean, we've seen him, and he would come in the cargo pants and the boots and all that. But this is one of those ones where if you order the pay-per-view, you wouldn't have saw it, but if you bought the actual VHS, you would have seen it. And I think if it's on the you can tell me, Will, or not. If it's on the network, I think you're going to see this match. But this is the Cuban Assassin. So that might shed some light on that for you.
Yeah, I've heard of the Cuban Assassin. All right. So that's basically as much as I want to get into the details of matches here. I'll run through the lineup, though. Brian Pillman versus Buddy Landell takes place. Mike Rotunda versus the Iron Sheik. Doug Furnace versus Dutch Mantell. Harley Race versus Tommy Rich, which just seems like a crazy match to be sitting in the middle of a card, but there it is. And
are we going to comment on that right there? Are you on Harley Race and Tommy Rich?
Are we going to what?
We're going to cover the. We're going to cover
what's going on? Because I was like, oh, hold on now. We're not just going to brush past that, right?
Well, we're going to cover it on Tuesday night in full.
Okay, all right, go ahead, man. Go ahead. Y'all know better than me. Go ahead.
What?
No. Well, now we're just talking about the build up to the pay-per-view. Oh man,
go ahead, man.
Rob's getting pissed at us. Sorry, guys. Rob, every show we end, like after it goes off, Rob is just like, listen here. He's like that video you've seen of what's his face from Fox News going wild. Not Hannity, but the other guy, I forgot his name. Like, we'll do it live. God damn it. You know, that guy. I can't remember. You know who I'm talking about? No? All right. No, not Greg Gutfield. It's
I hope it's
I'll
not
have to
Juan
find the
Williams.
video. It's not Juan Williams either. It's like from way back. He was working on like Inside Edition at the time or something, but he later became like a huge. All right, this is off the rails now.
Yeah, reining in.
We will go into for anybody who didn't catch this earlier on or just now joining the show, or you're Rob Stinson. We're just going over the lineup from the roster right now, and we're going to be talking about the pay-per-view in detail next week after everybody's seen the pay-per-view, and we can get back together. And on its actual anniversary, we'll discuss the pay-per-view. This pay-per-view also has the Midnight Express, Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane with Jim Cornette facing off against the Southern Boys, Steve Armstrong and Tracy Smothers. And we'll have to have a talk about their jackets, I guarantee you. And Big Van Vader takes on Tom Zink. And this is Big Van Vader's debut match in WCW/NWA. Like, this is it's a big deal. And you got the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, versus the Fabulous Freebirds, Jimmy Garvin and Michael Hayes. The Dudes with Attitude, Elegante, Junkyard Dog, and Paul Orndorff versus the Four Horsemen, Art Anderson, Barry Windham, and Sid Vicious. You got Lex Luger versus Mark Callis. Does that name sound familiar, you guys out there? It is the.
Are we talking about an hour? We wait until Tuesday.
Okay, listen. Bill O'Reilly, says James Lawrence in the chat. It was Bill O'Reilly having the freak out. Yeah. God help me. I could not think of his name for some reason. Anyway.
O'Reilly.
Do it live. Yeah. And then what else? Oh yeah, of course. The big one. You got Sting taking on Ric Flair for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. So that's where the big dogs come in. And that's what we're doing tonight. We're mainly talking about the build up to this show. I figure we'll talk about the undercard a little more that night. But today I was thinking, right, we kind of decided, let's talk about Sting. Let's talk about Flair. Let's talk about what went into this matchup. So obviously we, at some point in the future, I think we plan on doing a bunch of deep dives. But we're going to keep this in a brief overview, I think, because I don't think you can really like dive deep into every man's career involved in this. That's going to be just insane. So this is mainly about the rivalry between the two and leading up to the Great American Bash in 1990. Anybody got anything to add before I do that? I feel bad, like if I'm talking too much.
No, man, take it away. Go for it.
I mean, obviously we would have blocked Rob out for most of it now.
I just want to add that tune in for the deep dive and for the watch, because when we're talking about Harley Race and Tommy Rich, this isn't just like a random undercard match. This is a rivalry that is etched in the decades. These guys battled in Georgia for the World Championship. Both of them have their own niche in wrestling lore. Tommy Rich, not as much, although when I was growing up, he was the one that brought me into wrestling. He was the biggest name. Bigger than Ric Flair, bigger than Mr. Wrestling too. When I was growing up, freaking Tommy Rich was over like anybody. And then, of course, Harley Race was the perennial world champion growing up. My first world champion in my life was Terry Funk, but Harley Race had already held the belt, and he would hold it multiple more times. And so it's so like uncanny and so surreal to see in 1990 Tommy Rich and Harley Race lock up again. So I can't wait to watch that, guys. Watch that match with you guys, man. It's just important for history.
With you, man. I'm excited about it, and I'm glad you actually said that too, because I think that's good context to have going into it for when people see this. Because, like I mentioned when I was reading through it, I was like, wow, what a random, like, weird middle of the card match. Yeah. Like, it's just I mean, I get there's a rivalry. It just feels like, oh no, that's a main event match. Like, why is that just like right there in the center?
Man, that match would have sold out arenas all over the country back in 1982. I mean, that was it. Those were the two biggest names.
You're right. And speaking of big rivalries, another one that would start briefly right before this, but leading up to culminating right here into this pay-per-view is going to be that Sting versus Ric Flair. And of course, they would carry on for many more years, but this was a huge moment in time for those two superstars. But to talk about it, you got to kind of understand where those guys come from. And so I guess let's start with Sting here. Sting, a.k.a. Steve Borden, was originally wrestling under the name Flash when he teamed up with Jim Justice Hellwig. If you don't know that name, you might know him better as the Ultimate Warrior when he came to the WWE. But they were in a group called Power Team USA. Both these guys were like bodybuilders. That was their thing, hanging out on Muscle Beach, doing their thing until they got approached to start wrestling. People, they were looking for the body guys and that sort of thing. And these two guys were huge dudes and looked like they might be good at a wrestling ring. So they worked as Power Team USA in an independent All California. It was called All California Championship Wrestling. They were part of a 4-man unit that featured Garland, Glory, Donahoe, and Mark Commando Miller. Plus, they had a manager, Rick Bassman, who, if I'm not mistaken, was actually the guy who trained the both of them to wrestle and maybe discovered them. Later, they would move on to Continental Wrestling Association, CWA, based out of Memphis, Tennessee, and they became known as the Freedom Fighters. Fans didn't really take to them there either. And so they turned heel, and they were managed by Dutch Mantell. Was everything I've been able to find so far as they went on. They really didn't have much success there, and then they kind of moved to the Universal Wrestling Federation, which was run by Bill Watts, and that was based in Alexandria, Louisiana, where they were known as the Blade Runners. Steve Borden changed his name right there from Flash to Sting, and Hellwig became known as Rock, not Dwayne Johnson, though. They soon joined Hot Stuff and Hyatt International, a heel stable, which is headed up by Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert and Missy Hyatt. The Blade Runners became essentially henchmen with Eddie Gilbert's on-screen feud with Bill Watts. And so at that point right there, if you look at John Laurinaitis's, not John, who's Road Warrior Animal? I was trying to think of his real name. It's Laurinaitis.
Yeah, it's Laurinaitis.
Okay, so he said that the Blade Runners, I couldn't find any confirmation on this, but he basically described it that they were supposed to be a parody of the Road Warriors. And so they were bringing in Sting and the Warrior as parody of it, which Warrior would later go on to Ultimate Warrior, which he also says was so that he could have some connection to them.
Yeah. And so you got in those days, man, like there were multiple people that thought they could just have a great body and throw on face paint and go out there and be superstars. But the wrestling community really rejected that. They even rejected Demolition at first. Remember, Demolition, when they first came out, were looked at as Road Warrior knockoffs. Like the WWF was trying to knock off everything that was going good in the NWA. Well, part of the Blade Runners curse was that they came in at the wrong time. And they didn't come in as singles wrestlers because there were singles wrestlers that wore paint that got over, like T.J. Khan or the Barbarian or others. But to have them, I remember specifically as a kid looking at the Blade Runners and thinking, these are cheap, these are poor men's versions of the Road Warriors. And so that was a marketing. I mean, somebody insightful back behind stage said, hey man, we got to get on board with what the Road Warriors are doing. But people loved and respected the Road Warriors so much that anything that appeared like that was a parody, including Demolition. Now, Demolition earned their respect. They became, they ended up winning freaking WWF world titles out the kazoo, man. But I think that the whole Blade Runners thing was doomed to failure just because it was a timing issue, which ended up being a blessing in disguise because that meant that Sting would become Sting as a singles. Rock would go off and become the Dingo Warrior, and then later on become the Ultimate Warrior. And both of them as singles, this was a situation where the components were better than the composition. You know what I'm saying? So it was a timing issue.
Yeah. So the beauty part about doing one of these live is that we've got the chat there, and James Lawrence and Chad Reese helping us out with Joe Laurinaitis is Road Warrior Animal. That's who it is. I could not think of his first name for some reason. Mm-hmm. So around this time, there's the feud between Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert and Bill Watts, but as Hitchman and as a tag team, Hellwig abruptly left the company just out of nowhere. Kind of left Sting high and dry, I guess, in sort of a way. I did look into this to try to see exactly what happened there and why that happened, and were they mad at each other or what the deal was. And I did find an old interview with the Ultimate Warrior talking about it. And he had this to say. He said, we came in and Watts had this reputation for roughing up new guys, especially muscle guys that really wanted to make it and showed deference to him because he was the boss. After about 2 or 3 months, there was an instance where Watts wanted me to get down in the locker room in front of all of the other guys. I'd heard the story through the grapevine about what he does. He wanted me to get down on all fours like a dog, and he was going to show me how to throw a working kick to the underbelly, or so he makes you think. Well, I heard what he does is he'll just kick the shit out of you and bust your ribs, and it's a test to see if you'll just take the crap. And I knew what he was going to do, and I said, look, if you're going to if you want me on all fours, you're going to have to put me there yourself. And of course, he wasn't man enough to go for that. He wanted me at a disadvantage to begin with. This is something that the whole locker room didn't expect, because guys come in the business and they really want to make it and they do whatever it takes. But Steve just stood there and he didn't really back me up, even though we had this bond between ourselves that we were in this good or bad together. I was bothered by that. We really started splitting ways, thinking differently about goals, etc. Eddie Gilbert and some of the others got into Steve's ear, and our relationship just kind of fell apart. I was never afraid to think for myself, as Steve wanted to be handled. So I picked up the phone one day and called WCCW over in Texas, and they just left as soon as I had an offer, basically. So that's kind of a, hopefully not too long-winded, but an explanation from the Ultimate Warrior side of things on what happened between him and Sting and why the breakup happened. For what it's worth, Sting had success after that moment, though. Sting went on to win the UWF World Tag Team Championship twice with Eddie Gilbert. Got a lot of seems to have a lot of mentorship from Eddie Gilbert during this time, and he won the titles for a third time with Rick Steiner in 1987. I saw, and let's see here. And following a match against Terry Taylor in mid-'87, Gilbert interfered on Taylor's path, costing Sting the match. And Taylor and Gilbert ganged up on Sting until gentleman Chris Adams came to Sting's aid. Adams cleared the ring and then asked Sting if he was with him or against him in this feud with Terry Taylor and Gilbert. Sting turned babyface that day by declaring his allegiance to Adams. So that was like a big moment for Sting, though, because he would become the ultimate babyface. And this, of course, got the endorsement from Eddie Gilbert, who was telling everybody who'd listened that Sting was the next big superstar wrestling, including, like, he was feeding that information to what they call the dirt sheets with, like, Meltzer and those guys and stuff, saying, like, you got to keep your eye on this guy. He's huge.
And from a historical standpoint, let's keep this in perspective here, because there were a lot of people. Now we're building up the context for the showdown between Flair and Sting, which happened in a couple of iterations, which we'll talk about tonight. But to the big title change that happens, there were a lot of people being forwarded as the next big thing in those days. Lex Luger, Billy Jack Haynes in the Pacific Northwest, Eddie Gilbert was one of them. You had Barry Windham, who was always on the cusp of wresting that title from Flair. You had Kerry Von Erich, who was at that point had transitioned over to the WWF. But you had a lot of names that were going to be the next big name. And by big name, I'm not talking about like, hey, they're big. I'm talking about big name like Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair big. And Sting was one of those, but this is in a very, very bloated market. So, this sets the stage for what comes up at Clash, because Sting was one personality in a very big market of talent. Chris Adams being one of them, Gino Hernandez, other thing, the list goes on and on and on, but it was not yet. See, we think today like Sting, of course it's Sting, but we're reading our perspectives back on history. In 1986, 87, and 88, and 89, we did not know yet that Sting was going to be who he was. We did not know he was going to be a superstar. We knew he was a great-looking guy that had talent, that put face on, and he was charismatic. But there were 100 of those. So anyway, I just want to throw that in there that it was a big deal to get the Eddie Gilbert endorsement. Like, it was a huge deal because Eddie Gilbert, man, in those days, he held a lot of weight and a lot of authority and a lot of respect. And he himself was one of those that was touted as maybe he might be that guy that might be the next big thing. So.
No, appreciate that, Rob. I mean, that's why you're the doctor. So we like getting that perspective and that sort of thing. So, yeah, and you're right with like Eddie Gilbert. He was so behind Sting during this time that he had him tabbed to win the UWF Television Championship, which he himself, Gilbert, held. He was going to put Sting over to win that title, but unfortunately, that never did happen. I don't think because Jim Crockett came along with the National Wrestling Alliance, and they bought the company from Watts. That's like a whole other story. I remember there being like a whole thing about this, like I think this is back when the real rivalry was going on between WWE or WWF and NWA and like buying up territories and stuff like that. But yeah, so they ended up buying out Watts from it. I think originally, if I'm not mistaken, I read something about Turner was going to buy UWF and work out a deal with Watts, but Crockett worked out something underneath that and kind of took it away from Turner at that point. But anyway, just a side note.
The best, if you want to get a quick snapshot of that, y'all need to read, and we all three have read it, Brian Solomon's Pro Wrestling FAQ. He gives a good, very brief synopsis. He's not going to tax you and all that. I mean, this is, to me, this book, up with Hornbaker's books, this Pro Wrestling FAQ is like the best synopsis of like a quick, a broad brush stroke of what was happening. And he goes into the Bill Watts UWF thing, and he'll give you a good, if you guys don't have background knowledge on it, before tomorrow, shoot, just text me, man. I'll send you a little scan of the page. But better yet, you need to go and buy this book because it gives you some great insight.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for that. I think all three of us have that book. You doing all right over there, Will? Am I boring you to death or anything?
No, man. I'm taking it all in. I agree with James in the chat who mentions Sting was a better all-around talent. I mean, I think even in those days you could see that. And, it as unfortunate as that split was, obviously it was really better for both of them. I mean, Warrior got to go be himself and make a name for himself. And then obviously as we're getting to, Sting did the same and became arguably, as you said, one of the biggest and best baby faces in all of wrestling consistently. And definitely for WCW, the franchise guy. And we're still talking about him today, and he's got a storied career. And this was really the beginning of that. And so I think it's cool that their paths started together and then they went their really completely separate ways and made different marks on the industry. But yeah, I mean, I've always been a Sting guy. I liked Ultimate Warrior as a kid. But I mean, Sting just had that draw to him and that all around talent and that it's hard to explain with words, man. I mean, cause I was a 8-9-year-old kid, when I was first exposed to Sting and WCW, and it was just it was gripping, man. And I love that. This pay-per-view, I remember, I don't think I watched it live, but I watched the VHS of it, as you alluded to, Rob. And I mean, this was just such a storied rivalry, and this was the kickoff of that. So this is great.
Just as an aside, did you guys ever have the Sting rat tails growing up? Because I know I did.
I knew a bunch of people with rat tails, but I never actually had the rat tail. I did want to spike my hair like Sting, though. I did try that for a little while.
All of my daughters have had rat tails. Petra's got a little rat tail right now. Well,
I was going to show y'all this because in preparation, I always have this on my desk. But this is my 1990, coincidentally, Galoob Sting figure. He's got the rat tail, man. It's like true to life, And look at that muscle tone on the back there. I mean, God.
That guy works his back. Yeah.
Dude, look at that.
He does
He's
some
been
pulls.
doing the Eli Drake 30-day challenge, man. That's what's going on right there.
He's been doing the 5-year challenge to have a back. Jeez.
I would Chad Reese. Like, it's funny, like, looking back on it now, I think growing up, the Ultimate Warrior was one of my favorite wrestlers when I first got into wrestling. He was hard to beat as a kid, but mainly just because, like, I think Warrior just had that wild personality, and it was just easy to get behind a guy when you're a young kid that's just like raging and just runs in the ring and just like stomps the crap out of somebody in like 5 minutes and then leaves. You're like, that must be the greatest wrestler ever. But
and I
looking
feel
back now, you're like, obviously Sting had the most talent.
Yeah, no, I feel like at the time, like that was, you were kind of either one or the other. And it was really based on if you were a WWF kid or a WCW kid. And Gary, you mentioned you were a WWF kid. I was a WCW kid all the way. I was aware of the WWF, but I didn't watch it on any kind of regular basis. And I did think that the Ultimate Warrior was cool. But, again, it just did not have the grip on me that Sting did, seeing him week in, week out, on WCW Saturday night and things like that. I think that sums it up when you talk about all around talent. I mean, you're talking about in the ring, obviously he was outstanding, but on the mic, he was compelling. And I feel like that was something the Ultimate Warrior didn't necessarily have, because he was kind of this over the top, just, Tasmanian devil type character, which was cool. But Sting was just a lot more true to life and a lot more like believable, I think, as a character and as an athlete, because he was just a lot more down to earth and likable, honestly, in my mind. It was easier. We talk about this a lot in terms of NWA, but the difference for me between Sting and the Ultimate Warrior is Sting was, it was easier to connect with Sting as a person. Right, because even though I didn't wear face paint and have a rat tail and a blonde flat top, the way he talked and his feuds and things like that were a little more realistic and believable than this Ultimate Warrior character who just like had endless energy and just would just run for no reason and just pump his arms, and when he talked he sounded like an animal or something. And I get that was his character, but again, it was just more, Sting was a more relatable character. He was more lifelike, and that, to me, that was why even as a kid I bought more into Sting.
I think you were more of a thinking man's wrestling fan than I was when I was a kid, because I was just like,
even at 9 years old, I was very philosophical when it came to the wrestling business.
Yeah, I just never, obviously, like I said, I can look back now and I say like, the Sting definitely had it going more than Warrior did, but at the time, I don't know. It's weird that I ended up a WWF fan early on, because I grew up in like Southeast Georgia. Like I should have had NWA, but I don't know, for some reason it's, and in my younger days it wasn't as accessible for some reason, and WWE's or WWF's what got me. We can move on here and talk about that once Jim Crockett bought the UWF, Sting kind of made that arrival in the NWA. It was about July 87 from what I could gather, and Dusty Rhodes was booking at the time, as far as my understanding, and he kind of liked Sting and decided to throw him out in his first foray into pay-per-view in Starrcade 87. He was in the opening match, threw him in there with Michael P.S. Hayes and Jimmy Garvin, the Fabulous Freebirds, in a 6-man tag match against Gilbert Steiner, Larry Zbyszko. I didn't write down which Steiner that was. I guess that would have been good. I guess that would have been Rick at the time, probably, right?
It was Rick. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it ended in a 15-minute time limit draw, but he definitely proved himself and established himself as a rising star, and ended up actually becoming one of the only members of the UWF alumni to be pushed in the NWA. They weren't, I think at the time it was touted like this would be a huge deal, but a lot of the UWF guys got kind of buried at the time, like not really anybody was used to their abilities. I think you would see a lot of people argue, but Sting got the love, and he ended up, this is about the time, he kind of, as a rising star, the rookie kid, and was so popular and established himself so much that he was able to, I wish there was more buildup to this. He kind of, Rob, you may know more minute details, but he kind of barges right in, and at Clash of the Champions 1 in March of 1998, Sting challenges Ric Flair for the World's Heavyweight Championship. for some context for people who don't know, Clash of the Champions started as a rivalry show to, I think this was WrestleMania 4 at the time, WrestleMania 4 on pay-per-view. These guys decided to throw on a show free on TBS for anybody to watch in hopes of challenging the show. And so this was the headline of that: Sting versus Ric Flair for the World's Heavyweight Championship. Rob, do you have any more details about the build-up for that I just didn't see?
This was an opportunity. I think they were alluding to fan reactions and fan responses back in those days about who they wanted to see challenge Flair. My memory is vague, but I remember that by that point, Sting had become, just through sheer force of charisma, size, and ring ability, and his ability to talk on the microphone, he had become the most over babyface in the company. And again, it's kind of like, the Four Horsemen War thing and all that, but the NWA has always been about human interest stories, and babyface and heel's not ever been. I mean, it's always been there, but it's not been a preoccupation. And so, in those days, Flair was considered to be a performance sport prize fighter also. And so this Clash of the Champions match, the build-up felt very natural. It felt, this is at the time of Tyson, Buster Douglas, man, Tyson, Spinks. This felt very much like that. Like, we got this young upstart who Flair is probably going to beat, but it's interesting to see him because, remember, in those days, we look at everything in hindsight and everything in retrospect, and we're so conditioned to titles changing hands left and right in the WWE and so forth. But in the NWA, it didn't happen like that. A title might change hands once every year or two. And it felt like Flair just could not be beat. He was at the peak of his game. And so I don't feel like, even as a kid back then, that I thought that Sting was in the same league as Flair, but I was very intrigued by the prize fight. So that's kind of what was leading up to it. Sting wasn't anything then, man. Sting wasn't the Sting that we know. I mean, he was over, he was popular, people felt like the sky was the limit for him, but he had not yet even emerged as this is going to be the main event guy. So this was a huge, huge opportunity for him going into this match.
Yeah, that's a great point. And props to the chat. I love having the live chat for some of these sometimes because they throw in some details. And Chad Reese mentions, Clash of the Champions, by the way, was only free because they were going to throw it on pay-per-view, apparently, it sounds like. And then Vince threatened all of the cable operators that if you use this other brand on pay-per-view, we won't use you anymore. And so they kind of their hand was forced. And I think they wanted to go head-to-head with WWE, but decided to go with it for free on cable. And James Lawrence in the chat mentions that Dr. Death was supposed to get a push against Flair in a title unification match, but it fizzled out there. So,
right. There were a couple of things. There was Terry Taylor and Nikita Koloff that was anticipated as this big feud between competing TV champions or national champions, and there were others. Steve Williams was a main eventer in those days. He would go to Japan with guys like Terry Gordy and and Hogan, and just steal the show because he's such a big dude, But yeah, he was supposed to get a push, and I don't know why things play out that way, but it's crazy. But the point I wanted to make about the whole pay-per-view thing and going head-to-head with Mania, let's look at the foresight here of Bill Watts and the promoters and all that. To go head-to-head with WrestleMania, who are the two guys that are going to carry it and challenge? Sting and Ric Flair. Sting and Ric Flair. Now, to us, that seems like, of course, but that wasn't the case then. That we did not know yet. Sting was still a new thing. He was cool, but he was still a new thing, and that just shows a lot of foresight in marketing and just gambling and risk-taking.
Yeah, and I think, so for context around that, there was a war building up between McMahon and the NWA, but it started when they booked Survivor Series and Starrcade on the same day, and Vince basically sent out a decree to the cable operators that said, if you're going to carry Starrcade, I'm going to pull my pay-per-views off of your provider. And then he was kind of warned after that, like not to do that anymore, not to make, the cable operators do that. And so Clash of the Champions was kind of the NWA WCW saying, we don't have to be on pay-per-view. We'll go up against you on free live television. And so this was kind of a continuation. But the great thing is, man, how many great Clash of the Champions did we get after this started, man? Clash of the Champions was such a pivotal point of my child, because like when I was a kid, like we weren't forking out $50 for a pay-per-view, so I didn't get to see. I mean, the first pay-per-view I ever saw, even though I was a WCW kid, the first actual pay-per-view I saw live was a Royal Rumble, and it was like 92 or something like that. But it was like, the Clash of the Champions to me was WrestleMania. For a kid like me who wasn't going to get to buy any pay-per-views, it literally was WrestleMania. So I love, it did kind of start out and have like some spiteful beginnings, but because of that, the product was just elevated. And so, sometimes those things do come from, these wars and backstage politics and stuff like that. Sometimes we as wrestling fans can benefit from that. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, you say spiteful, but I think, their hand was forced. They had to do something. I looked at Superpower from NWA kind of like that. Like I enjoyed that, like almost like the free, like short pay-per-view that you can watch, with some actual big matches on it. Guys, let's jump in here and let's give a little context for the other guy that's main eventing this Great American Bash 90, and that's Ric Flair. Now, where do you even start with Ric Flair, though? Because he's like possibly the most legendary of wrestling figures. His history is like way too much to cover tonight. There's way too many stories, but I thought an easy way for me to get some perspective on Ric Flair during this is I started looking at some accomplishments right around this time, just from the outside wrestling press. So I looked this up and I documented this. So for Pro Wrestling Illustrated, where our friend Brian Solomon, whose book you just pitched, is a contributor, he throws in Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Ric Flair was in the Feud of the Year in 1987 with the Four Horsemen versus the Superpowers and Road Warriors. Feud of the Year in 1988 versus Lex Luger. Feud of the Year in 1989 versus Terry Funk. Feud of the Year in 1990, again with Lex Luger. That's from Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Wrestling Observer, old Uncle Dave over there, Ric Flair had the Match of the Year in 1983. Again in 1986, 1988, 1989, 1980, 1982, through 1984, 1993, I think I said all of those for Match of the Year, but he also got most charismatic in 1980, 1982 through 84, and in 1993. Most outstanding in 86, 87, 89. And he was the reader's favorite wrestler in 84 through 1993, and again in 1996, and won Wrestler of the Year 1982 through 1986, 1989, 1990, 1992. He was all right.
In 1990, PWI Wrestler of the Decade. 1990 PWI Wrestler of the Decade. And
so Flair was hitting it somewhere. I don't know. He was young up and comer too.
And I got to take my friend J Cal. I love J Cal, man. I usually defer to him on everything, and he's got, J Cal is Moses in the wilderness, man. He was there when nobody else was there, so he has a very deep, ethereal, existential attachment to Dan Severn, Dan Severn, and Adam Pearce and some of those other guys, to the point that he will say that Flair is not on his Mount Rushmore, and that's where I've got to be like, J Cal, you know this better than anybody. Separate yourself from the emotion. Ric Flair is the greatest of all time. It's not an argument. I mean, I want to hear the argument against Ric Flair. He has this lady. So this is, you're coming into Clash of the Champions, and then after that bash, so you've got this young upstart, talented, charismatic, but that's what he's got going for him, Sting. He's got charisma and talent. What has Ric Flair got going for him? Only the greatest resume in the history of the sport, going back to 1905 and before that, even to the foundations of the world. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, this whole feud begins at the end of one of the most epic feuds, which didn't even win Feud of the Year. Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat. People who go back, scholars look back and look at that series of matches between Steamboat and Flair and say, this was when Steamboat was at his best, and this was when Flair was at his best. Flair loses the belt with Steamboat, wins it back, and that's when things are set in motion for the collision ultimately between Flair and Steamboat at Bash. But before that, of course, we had the Clash of the Champions that puts Sting on the map.
Yeah, I was looking through, just trying to kind of thinking to myself, like, all right, I get all these things out of the way. How do I recap Flair? And he obviously had a storied career all up into this Clash of the Champions. But the main things I noted down is he'd had his first NWA championship in September of '81 versus Dusty Rhodes. And despite many bumps in the road after that, he'd hold it until June of '83, where he officially lost it to Harley Race. This would, of course, lead to the epic a Flair for the Gold Starcade, where Flair would win it again in November of '83. Flair would go on to trade the title in epic feuds with Kerry Von Erich, Dusty Rhodes, or even a weird one with Harley Race that everybody recognizes except WWE. So that'd be interesting to look into sometime. It had a quick odd attempt where they put it on Ron Garvin, and Flair had he had just won it back from Ron Garvin after a brief stint there. Going into the Clash. So I think what you're saying basically, Rob, is, this is peak Flair. This is him on fire, running roughshod through the wrestling industry. There is nobody better than Ric Flair at this time. The only rival he has is a Hulk Hogan or something, is in terms of name. This is.
And
this
is
the man.
Time when the WWF and NWA did not acknowledge each other's existence. You can argue. I would argue, and I'm always teachable on this stuff. But from 80, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, those 5 years, nobody who's ever graced the squared circle has ever put in a body of work like Ric Flair has. This is not Ric Flair on going, over the hill. This is Ric Flair at his peak. The only person that's put in a body of work like this ever is Nick Aldis. And that's why I've always said that this is the time to start considering Nick Aldis up there in that echelon of greats of all time. I'll stand by that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm always supporting Nick Aldis to be one of the greats of all time. Saw some votes for Chris Jericho in there. That was interesting in the chat. But moving on, this Clash, what we already said, was right across from WrestleMania 4, free on TBS. Ended up drawing a 5.6 rating. In this match, J.J. Dillon was suspended above the ring in a cage to keep him out of the way. And it was just basically the young new guy Sting trying to prove himself against the best wrestler in the world. And he did. The match actually ended in a draw after the 45-minute time limit expired, and the ringside judges could not declare a winner. So already right here, Rob mentioned that, this was a guy that coming into the match, you're I like this guy. He's cool. Sting's cool, but he's not the Sting we know now. This was just a young, cool dude. And you're the Flair's going to beat him, but it should be fun. Flair doesn't beat him. It actually goes to a time limit draw, which is a cool move there. Your ringside judges in the thing were wrestling official Gary Juster, who gave the match to Sting, but Penthouse model Patty Mullen decided in favor of Flair. Which, imagine that, the Penthouse model. Wrestling official Sandy Scott ruled it a draw. And no decision was announced for the remaining two judges, which were actor Jason Hervey from the Wonder Years and Ken Osmond. It resulted in it being ruled completely a draw, and Flair retained the title. So that's how the original Clash won. But that's actually, for what it's worth, that's a big deal for Sting at that point. He had never had a match with somebody in that caliber of opponent.
Yeah, first of all, I love the Wonder Years. So great reference there. Second of all, let's not skim over the fact that you said it was a 45-minute time limit draw.
Yeah, that's what I had here.
That's unheard of. Maybe not back then, but now, just put that in context. That's sensational that they went that long. And I remember I've watched that match in the last 12 months at some point. And it's incredible. Like, there's not really a lot of words to describe it other than like, and it's funny because you mentioned this, and when I went back and I started watching the Clash of the Champions, I think I was trying to watch them like in order just when I was bored. And I remember watching this, and I really had no idea that was like his first. Like, it really felt like just in the ring that these guys had been working together for years. And I just thought in my mind, because I've seen the feud and I've seen them work together a lot. It just seemed like that had been going on already for 3 or 4 years. And so now that I know that, that blows my mind. Just go back and watch that match and tell me this is their like first big headlining main event. They blew it out of the water. It was definitely a pay-per-view level main event. I mean, could have highlighted any WrestleMania, Starrcade, whatever pay-per-view, and it was free on TV, and they went 45 minutes. And it's interesting because like now we're so conditioned that when you have like a no finish like that, or a draw or something like that it's like a disappointment. That match was not a disappointment. Like, everybody came out of that match looking spectacular, and that's a lost art. You know, we talk about that a lot when we're talking about historical wrestling and stuff like that, is to be able to sit there and invest 45 minutes into a match. Nowadays, it's more like 15 minutes or 30 minutes at the most, but into a match where there's not a decision, like nobody comes out the winner, nobody loses, but still you do not regret investing that time because it was just such an amazing feat that you just witnessed happen inside a wrestling ring, and a great story that was told, between the four corners. And that's the kind of stuff that this business is about. And that's what we're about. That's why we love the NWA, because we believe out of all the promotions that exist today, this modern iteration of NWA probably has the best probability of pulling something like that off, because that's the stuff that our childhood was made of. And that's the stuff that created, fairy tales and these larger than life stories in our minds when we were growing up. And so I just didn't want to gloss over that, because that is a huge accomplishment in and of itself, that those guys went 45 minutes and both elevated each other in the process. And that's phenomenal.
Right. And remember, like, it's such a good work of storytelling. Like, it's not just that Sting came off looking good. Let's remember what was happening when that 45-minute time limit elapsed. What was going on in that ring? Sting had Flair in the Scorpion Deathlock, man. Yep. And he had beaten Flair. Flair was literally saved by the bell, to throw another show reference in there that I like a lot.
Of the 90s.
Jeff Johnson wants us to not glaze over the fact that Jason Hervey went on to be Eric Bischoff's television production partner. So just throw that in there.
He had a hand in that even before that. He had some hand in investing, and as a stockholder, I think, in Crockett Promotions or something. But I'd heard that before, that he was not only just a fan, but that he'd had some business dealings with Crockett, and then later on with WCW. So that's true.
And to add on to what Will was talking about with the time limit draw part of it, James Lawrence is quick to mention and should mention, this is 45 minutes on TV. This is not just any 45-minute time limit draw. This is on just regular television. You're getting a 45-minute classic time limit draw.
Historically, Clash of the Champions did not do commercials during their matches, which is something we're accustomed to now. If you watch, mainstream cable television, you're used to seeing either the picture-in-picture or having a commercial break during a match. They did not do that at Clash of the Champions. So this was 45 minutes, no advertisements, straight up. You witnessed the match as it happened live.
Yeah. And in that 45 minutes, the landscape of the NWA was changed forever, because at this point, there was a seismic shift. From this point on, Sting is not just a good-looking, charismatic, good-looking body with paint on his face. Sting is now a contender for the World Championship. From this point on, and it would never abate. Now, Sting was the franchise of the NWA and what would later become the WCW. So this is truly one of the great historic moments in NWA lore.
Yeah, Sting would end up going on to face Flair a few more times in non-television rematches following the clash. He'd end up losing all of those, I think, pretty much that he faced him. But they were non-televised, so they just like carried out the feud a little bit, and I guess you'd call them house shows or whatever. But he would go on also to face a lot of people in Flair's stable. Chad Reese mentioned the Four Horsemen in the live chat. It just, was also crazy. There was no interference from the Horsemen, which was unheard of at the time. And James Lawrence also pointing out that Sting's assuming that Magnum TA spot here, which is a good point to mention. But I'll probably be safe for like a deeper dive into something like this or somebody's career. But Sting would go on to feud with a bunch of members of the Four Horsemen. He ended up teaming with Koloff at the Great American Bash in July of '88. They challenged Tully and Arn for the NWA World Tag Team Championship. Blanchard and Arn retained the titles, I think, when that also went to a time limit draw. So Sting constantly getting screwed out of things with the time limit draw. But Dusty Rhodes liked him a lot and continued to book Sting in title matches throughout the year against like the United States champ, which was Barry Windham at the time, and the television champ, which was Mike Rotunda. And in the fall of '88, Sting actually got in a big feud when he was attacked by Hawk and Animal and the Road Warriors after a televised match. And Dusty Rhodes identified Sting as like a huge deal, and he wanted a part of that, I think. And they were looking for an easy way to turn the Road Warriors heel. So Dusty ended up working that in, just for context, to like team with Sting to face the Road Warriors after the Road Warriors had like hurt Sting and Dusty basically. So that kind of helped him make that transition. I just thought that was an interesting side note there. But Rhodes and Sting, I think, ended up beating the Road Warriors, I think, in the feud that went to Starrcade '88, if I'm not mistaken, in that, but it was by disqualification, so the Road Warriors retained.
Yeah, and this was like the Road Warriors were so over. This is one of those situations where you can never turn. This is back to the heel babyface thing. Like the workers in the ring don't always have that choice, because even with this, I mean, these guys, the Road Warriors put Dusty Rhodes' eye out with a spike, and they were still over. Even Sting, so they bring Sting in to finally do the job, and that still didn't work. That's how over they were. But Sting in that time too, at some point in that time frame, emerging as the guy that was the one potentially to fill in that Magnum TA spot, like James Lawrence was saying, to be the one to wrest the belt from Flair. Sting wins the Crockett Cup with Lex Luger. Like, they win the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup at some point, and he is like on all fronts, tag team, solo. It's an effort to move storylines, it's an effort to turn the Warriors heel. Sting is being increasingly looked at as the guy who is going to be the standard bearer of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And so after that battle, Sting ends up returning to singles matches in '89. He started that year off wrestling Flair to a 1-hour draw in Atlanta's Omni on New Year's Day. And he had his first experience in Japan. He went over to Japan for a tour with All Japan Pro Wrestling. Had a pretty notable match with Dan Spivey I saw over there in June of '89. Ended up coming back and winning his first actual NWA championship when he defeated Mike Rotunda for the NWA television champion in March. Though, and Sting defended the television title pretty actively against people like the Iron Sheik, and I think I saw a big feud with the Great Muta during that time as well. On the other side of it, Ric Flair went on to have his own thing going on in February of '89 in the Chi-Town Rumble in Chicago. Ricky Steamboat pinned Flair to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and that prompted, we kind of talked about it a little bit, a series of rematches where Steamboat was the family man, often accompanied by his wife and young son, and Flair was the opposition as the immoral, fast-living ladies' man, seducer. And then following the best of 3 falls match with Steamboat that lasted just short of 60 minutes, where Steamboat retained the title at Clash of the Champions 6, Raging Cajun, Flair regained the title from Steamboat on May 7th, '89 in Wrestle War. which was, by the way, voted as 1989's Match of the Year by Pro Wrestling Illustrated. He would go on to defend that world title against Terry Funk. That was it was like the Great American Bash, and Funk had the faction, the J-Tex Corporation, I believe, and Flair was supposed to have the Four Horsemen. After Flair gets the victory in this match, he's attacked by the Great Muta, who was Funk's buddy at the time. And who would come to his aid at this time but Sting, of all people? This is his rival, and Sting comes to save Ric Flair from the attack with Great Muta, because obviously that previously mentioned rivalry with Muta. And Flair and Sting would begin to feud with Muta and Funk for the rest of the summer and fall, which culminated in a Thunderdome cage match between the two teams, which Flair and Sting won at Halloween Havoc 89. And this led to Sting joining the newly reformed and now babyface Four Horsemen, along with the Andersons, Arn and Ole. Do you remember all this, Rob?
Man, like I remember it. Like I know that. I know that like I know the knob on the back of Petra's head, man. That story was so amazing to me, man, because like I always loved Flair, man. I always did. And you know, I mean, there's something about it, you know, I mean, I like the bad guys or something, but there's something too human about us too, that we root for the good guys as well. And it was so neat to me that Sting and Flair, it would be like Dusty Rhodes joining the Horsemen, but and not as much because Dusty Rhodes was so much bigger, but it was on that scale because Sting had become on that echelon of talent where he was one of the main baby faces in the company. And so for him to join forces with Flair, and this goes back again to the theme that I'm always hitting on, that babyface and heel has not ever been a preoccupation. Right before this, Flair was the top heel in the company, man. I mean, you got J-Tex and Gary Hart, and they were much more sinister and more colorful. But Flair was still a heel, and we were like, you know, Sting joining in. What we weren't quite sure that meant that Flair was a baby yet. We didn't know what it meant. We just knew that it wasn't that big a deal. That now, the greatest organization in wrestling, the Four Horsemen, now had joined forces with Sting. And we had no clue what this meant or what it portended for the future, but it was big. It was important, man. I love this. And it wasn't just by accident that Sting joined in this. Remember when Muta attacked Flair, Sting and Muta were having a big feud at the time too. And so this was sort of a natural, it was almost like just the landscape forced these two together. And I remember Pro Wrestling Illustrated putting in an organization or an issue out about how Sting's friendship was killing Flair. Like it was not natural to him. I can't remember. I think I've got it somewhere in my archives, but how this friendship was so unnatural and that secretly was killing Flair. Like they were dropping these hints that, look, guys, don't settle into this friendship. This is Flair paying respect and showing appreciation to someone who helped him. But let's not get away from the fact that Flair didn't change his personality overnight just because Sting helped him. Flair is still Flair and Sting is still Sting, and this is oil and water.
Yeah. I mean, I love that Muta played such a big part in that because, I mean, thinking back, I mean, to me, I mean, Sting had a ton of great feuds. I mean, obviously him and Flair is the one we're focusing on here. But Sting and Great Muta was next level feud. I mean, those guys had some barn burners. I remember as a kid, you know, too. I mean, the Great Muta was seen as such a just a crazy character, man. He had the green mist, and he, it was kind of scary, you know, and so that feud was just really, really pivotal, and it helped, you know, solidify Sting as even more of a baby face. Not that he wasn't already solidified as the face of the company, but like that feud and leading into this and how that became such a pivotal thing. You know, I love that we're talking about that to give it some context, because that does play a major role. I mean, you don't have the prestige of Ric Flair versus Sting and what this feud meant if you don't have Sting versus Muta, and then you don't have the pairing that happened coincidentally when Flair and Sting teamed up against, a common enemy. But like you said, Rob, like it was definitely kind of an unnatural pairing, and you never felt like those guys were buddies. You didn't feel like Sting was hanging out with Flair. You knew they had business to take care of in the ring, so they were going to join up and do that. But Muta was such a big part of that, and I love like going through this story so that we can get that full picture.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. I used to like every time I watch a show like Game of Thrones or something like that, you're always like, except for the last season. You're always like, man, this is such a good story. And there's like so many different players involved in this storyline. Like, why can't wrestling just get to that? But you look back and wrestling has kind of worked that way, like in the past, like it's like with this Muta thing, like that it's just like they've got their own thing going on, but this is well thought out booking. And I don't know who to credit most, because I think Ole does come in as a booker at some point here. And Dusty had been booking, and then it was Ole or something. If I'm not mistaken, it was something like that. And but it's just like, what a perfect transition to have that Sting and Muta feud lead perfectly into Sting joining the Horsemen and continuing this storyline that has the history that it has from already back to the Clash and will have going forward. It's just that's good stuff, man. That's why we love this stuff.
It's like watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie, man, at the end where all these ends sort of suddenly, like, you realize, oh my gosh, they've been playing us the whole time. That's how good, that's how wrestling should be. The NWA does it today. They do it today just like that. But they've been doing it forever, man. I mean, this story is just, it's Greek and Roman mythology, man. That's why we love it so much.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, for me, I'm a huge nerd for storyline continuity, long-term storytelling, things like that, which are, again, like almost unheard of in mainstream wrestling today in 2020. But, you look at that story arc and you've got, and I mean, this is years in the making. This isn't like now we're used to all of this happening between, WWE pay-per-views. They try to like compact some nonsensical story, but this was like years of, man, we believed Sting and Great Muta hated each other. We saw it in the ring. We saw the storyline play out. And then we really believed that Ric Flair and Sting could form an alliance, so to speak, against Great Muta because they had a common enemy. And then they teamed up and Sting's part of the Four Horsemen. And then and all this was leading up to what we're talking about with Great American Bash 1990, where, when you see that iconic shot, I think you tweeted it out earlier today, Gary, of just, Sting in the American, red, white, and blue face paint and Ric Flair facing off in the ring. I see that photo all the time. It's so iconic, and this match is so iconic. But it's iconic because this was years of storytelling leading up to a feud that was going to become a benchmark feud in wrestling, not just the company, but in all of wrestling. And all of that is due to this long-term story arc that was strategically put together and told in a cohesive way, which is it just makes me want so much more of that in today's, because I can't even think of any storylines in the last 10 years that could even match that in WWE or something like that. Like something that has that kind of patience, that has that kind of diligence to tell that story, get you that bought in. And when you're that bought in, when that match actually happens, it's massive.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rob was right. I mean, I guess I personally, I just remember hearing about it. My big thing is always telling the stories about hearing the kids in school tell me about what was going on the NWA stuff. And so this always intrigued me about like the Flair and Sting rivalry. I remember just being excited about it, just hearing the stories secondhand a lot of times. So it's interesting to hear Rob's perspective that even at this point, you're excited, but you're also like, this doesn't mean anything. Like this, I mean, it means something, but we don't know yet, and we don't know what's going to happen from here. And that's kind of exciting to hear. Well, this, of course, then, if you've been hanging out with us and doing cast app stuff with us, Rob got us in on this one a little while back. I mean, Sting and the Four Horsemen have their little run, but it ends up pointing to Starrcade 89, which featured in a 4-man round robin Iron Man tournament, if I could say that 3 times fast. And basically everybody was wrestling for points, which is a really cool concept to me. I had, honest to God, never seen this until like a month or 2 ago, and I kind of dug it. But the final match came down to Sting and Ric Flair. And of course, whoever won this match, that was going to be what mattered. And wouldn't you know it, Sting comes out on top and wins the Iron Man tournament. And it gets a little, I remember it looking a little iffy there at the end of that you're like, the Horsemen are congratulating Sting, which the Horsemen, I think we said, were Ole and Arn. I think Tully had failed a drug test. So like Ole got thrown in there, even though he was booking at this time. But they celebrate Sting. They're like waiting to see what Flair's going to do. And Flair finally does offer the congratulations. James Loris in the chat saying that he knew that there was going to be a problem with all of this at some point, because there was a whole statement, Rob, you may remember this, saying something about keeping the belt in the family, that they just wanted the belt there. And so that would lead to trouble down the road.
Then, like I liked Sting being in there, but even then, and I'm just a kid at this point, but even then I knew that this was not, I mean, I think we knew at some point that this was a marriage of convenience. We knew that. It was not going to be a surprise that the fallout that would happen later on at a future Clash of the Champions that we'll talk about here in a minute. It was inevitable. I felt that way as a kid. I didn't want it to happen. I didn't want it to happen the way it did happen, but we knew that for the Horsemen, it was about protecting titles. And Sting wasn't on board with that. This is apples and oranges. And it's, again, to reiterate what I said earlier, it's not like the people just became new people overnight, like you might see in a WWE gimmick where somebody just changes, or they just have a change of heart and the whole world is different. Now, Flair's been Flair. Flair's always been Flair. Even when Flair has been a baby, he's still Flair. You know, he's still going to do the eye gouge and the chop and the little cower in the corner. That's Flair. He's not. It's not a gimmick. It's real. You know, and the same thing with Sting. Sting's not doing a gimmick. Sting is Sting, and Sting and Flair are oil and water. It's cool to see them interact. It's even beautiful, but it's temporary, guys. And even then, I knew that.
So after that matchup, that basically made Sting the #1 contender for Flair's NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, which of course led to tension, like we're talking about here. And that's where we get to what, Rob, I think you were kind of alluding to, and maybe you can lend us a little more detail here. But on February 6, 1990, Clash of the Champions 10, Texas Shootout. This is basically Sting's last day on the job as a member of the Four Horsemen, as I recall, correct?
Yes, that's it. And again, going back to the whole keeping the belt in the family, they talked it up as though, you know, it's a win-win for us, because whatever happens at the end of this upcoming the winner of Future Shock, Starrcade 89, and Chad Reese, man, you've been so good, and I respect you. I have to disagree with you that Starrcade 89 was the worst Starrcade. I actually really like the Starrcade a lot, man. So many good personalities that normally.
I was going to point out that a lot of people do dislike that Starrcade. It's
and I think
weird because I saw it the first time.
It was very divisive because there was not one title match in the whole card, because the whole event was this tournament, this round robin tournament. And cheap plug for the Daily Show, I actually do a 5-minute full recap of all of the whole Starrcade 89, because I was just so fascinated by the concept and the points in the tournament and stuff. So if you want to go back, if you don't want to invest, you know, the couple of hours to watch it, go watch my 5-minute recap. But it was just such an interesting concept. And now looking back on it, it is really cool, but I can imagine in the moment when Starrcade is usually, headlined by a huge, biggest at the time world title match. I'm sure it was probably a letdown in that moment that there was no titles defended.
Right.
And, again, looking back on it, it's cool to us to see this kind of tournament because it's different. But I can see where Chad's coming from. I also don't agree with that just because my only perspective, I didn't watch it live and in context, but my perspective is that it was pretty cool, but I can see how in real time it was probably a letdown.
Yeah. And Chad Reese says, this is a knowledgeable fan. I've been just reading his comments. This is a guy who appreciates wrestling and knows what he's talking about. He points out some of the deficiencies in the tag team tournament that we mentioned during the cast that we thought was kind of confusing and everything, especially with the Midnight Express losing everything. I disagree with that, but growing up in Starrcade of all places being the granddaddy of it all, you think that belt being defended. I think that if we can get over that fact that this was not intended by booking at the time to be a place for a championship, this was intended to set up Sting Flair. If we can get over that, you've got some really remarkable things going on. You've got Road Warriors versus the Steiners. You've got Muta versus Flair, where Flair gets a clean pinfall over Muta. You've got Sting versus look at the singles matches. They're clean. There's no outside interference at all. Every match is a clean match, and you got Sting with a clear win over Flair with clear wins over Luger and Muta. I mean, this was like everybody at their best. There's a lot of gems here. So I see where Chad's coming from, and I don't want to throw shade on anybody who has that old school, because I do. Y'all know me enough to know that I feel like the title is it. The title drives everything. But I think that this was one of the rare instances in which they were using Starrcade, their flagship pay-per-view, to put over a match that they knew was going to be seismic and that they knew was going to be history-changing. They were doing this to forward the Steiner brothers and to forward Flair versus Sting. And so, anyway, I didn't want to veer into that, but where were we going before that? Gary, get me back on task here.
Well, no, it's okay, buddy. So what ends up happening here is like Sting is very adamant about the stuff that you said prior, that Sting doesn't play that game that the Horsemen were playing about, like James Lawrence put in the chat, the keeping it in the family thing. Sting, they're like, well, hey, if Flair's got the thing, it's in the family, and that's all that really matters. And Sting is very adamant about, no, dude, I am the number one contender, and I'm gonna get my title shot. And I think we should have a match. We don't have to hate each other. Let's just have a match. And they don't like that. And it leads up to this Clash of the Champions 10, where it's bittersweet, I guess, for Sting. I don't know. Maybe all bitter, technically. He gets kicked out of the Four Horsemen, essentially. My understanding is it's been a while since I've seen this one, but that just because he wouldn't relinquish that number one contender spot and wouldn't give that up, the Four Horsemen finally decided to take him out of the Four Horsemen. And that's actually earlier in the night. And then they have a match later that evening that Ole participates in. And it's Flair, Ole, and Arn, where they defeat Gary Hart International. But in the middle of the match, it's still a cage match. And Sting tries to do the run-in on that match. And sorry if I'm getting ahead of myself, but Sting ends up blowing out his knee in the middle of this match as well.
Right. Yeah. Let me hold off on that bit for a second. I want to get back to the conversation at the end since we've already talked about it. Arn Anderson gives this great – it's Ole Anderson, I think, that gives this great talk about how it was Flair that made an on-the-spot decision to admit Sting in. He comes in to save – to rescue Flair from the Muta, Terry Funk, Gary Hart attack. And as the Horsemen are coming in, now let's go back into history and look at the way the Horsemen operate. This isn't the first time in the history of the world that someone has tried to help Flair out and they have turned the tables. Let's remember back when Dusty Rhodes broke his leg. You remember that, Will?
Yep.
Dusty Rhodes intervened to help Ric Flair against who? Nikita Koloff. Right? The Russians are beating up Flair. Who comes in to save Ric Flair from the Russians? And he runs the Russians out of the cage. It is Ric Flair. It's Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes comes in to scurry the Russians. They leave. And then Tully and Arn come in. Tully, Arn, and Ole come in. And it looks like they're going to embrace Dusty And what do? Flair points at Dusty and says, I don't need your help. Take him out. And they break Dusty Rhodes' leg. And they really broke his leg. He really broke his leg, guys, like in real life. So fast forward. So people watching this match, this clash of the or going back to 1989 where Flair's getting attacked by Terry Funk and Great Muta. When Sting comes in, all of us with that context, what do we think is about to happen? What are we assuming is about to happen? We're thinking that the Horsemen are going to come in, and rather than congratulate Sting, they're going to attack Sting, but it doesn't happen. Ole says, Flair waves him off and throws up the Four Horsemen sign. And at that point, Flair makes the call on the spot that Sting was going to be protected. But what this also says is that Sting was always running in that stable on Flair's good graces, that he was only operating at the blessing and at the pleasure of Ric Flair. And so it's not about keeping the belt in the family, I guess is what I'm getting at. It's keeping the belt on Flair. And that's what that Clash of the Champions established, that Flair is the CEO of the company. Everybody has their role. You know, Anderson is Arn is the enforcer. Ole and JJ did the booking, the management, but Flair is the flagship. And if anybody violates that equilibrium, they got to go. And so all this time, Sting, which we already knew, we just didn't know when it was going to come to a head. All this time, Sting is operating on Flair's good graces. And what happens at that Clash of the Champions is just a natural extension of what happened to Dusty Rhodes when Dusty tried to rescue Ric Flair from the Russians and got his leg broke for it.
That's a cool amount of context there in the middle of this. Because of the injury with Sting, it forced the bookers to find a new opponent for Flair for the Wrestle War pay-per-view event that was coming up. And Lex Luger was chosen to challenge Flair at Wrestle War. During the match between Flair and Luger, Sting ends up coming down to motivate Luger to come back and beat Flair. Before this, Sting and Luger had also been kind of at odds. So it was almost a different approach with their relationship as well. When Luger was close to winning, Sting was attacked by Ole Anderson. Luger opted to save the already injured Sting and ended up losing the match by count out while assisting his buddy. Behind the scenes, supposedly the story here, sorry, I was trying to get to this and trying to think of the best way to say it. WCW officials had apparently wanted Flair to drop the title to Luger at Wrestle War, but Flair refused. He said that he had promised Sting, that he would hold the title until Borden could return to the ring. And despite the injury, Sting had to be utilized on television because of this. Like, Flair wouldn't drop this thing to anybody. And so they kept Sting on television in some kind of role throughout to keep that rivalry and that interaction alive, I guess. Is that all clicking for you, Rob?
Yeah, no, exactly what you were saying, man. And I was just looking in I was about to comment on James Lawrence because he said Dusty saved the Russians. It's like, no, but then he corrected himself. So, now what you said, Gary, I really don't have anything to add to it. I think you summarized it perfectly.
I just like to jump back to you every once in a while to make sure I'm not just feeding
a
bunch of BS.
I actually wrote the Wikipedia article that you're reading from. So.
Oh, well, there you go.
Believe it.
Nice. Thanks for selling me out. I just wanted you to think I just
kidding,
do this
man.
stuff. Oh man. Let's see what else here do I have in the old notes. The next thing up is sorry, I lost my place in my own notes. And no, I mean, that's pretty much it, really, guys. I mean, what happens from here is they get to Capital Combat in May, and Sting's still getting accosted by the Four Horsemen. He gets thrown into a metal cage. I guess this is all when he's recovering. But luckily for Sting on that evening, RoboCop was in attendance and rescued him from the cage and chased off the Four Horsemen
Let me add one thing here, Gary. This is where we're starting to see a low point in Ric Flair's career. Just for some context, mentioning the Luger feud and everything, Luger was inserted into this. Flair was not going to drop the belt to Luger, okay? And he didn't. I mean, no shade on Luger, man. I think Luger was misused, but this enters this phase in '89 and '90 where Flair has a series of matches with Luger. One of them was Capital Combat. There was a couple of others where, through some mishap, I think there was one match where Luger had Flair in the torture rack, and the match was stopped because Luger had a cut on his head. It's like the most unbelievable thing. I mean, people lost their minds. But in most circumstances, what would happen is Flair would retain by disqualification. He had a series of losses by DQ. There was even talk in PWI about stripping Flair of the belt because of this mismanagement, and that was a real thing. This was at the time when everybody was starting to question AWA. AWA had lost their contract with ESPN. Larry Zbyszko was the champion, and he was doing a series of things like that, where he wasn't showing up for appearances, or he would win or retain under inauspicious circumstances. And PWI stripped AWA of its world championship status. So they were starting to hang that threat over Crockett in the NWA because of Flair and Luger. And so this was like leading up. I think part of it was like setting the inevitability of Sting's return and what that was going to mean. Because I think at this point, even as big of a Flair fan as I was, I just knew that when Sting returned, there was nothing in the world, barring Horseman interference, that was going to keep him from winning the belt. There was nothing that was going to stop that from happening.
I think it's like a really cool moment of, despite what anybody could think about somebody like a Ric Flair or something like that, that he promised Sting that he would hold the belt until they could wrap that rivalry up, or get to a conclusion like that. It just, that's pretty cool. I just think it's a really... He
knew the value too of him maintaining that run, because, obviously it would have been an option to have Luger win the belt and then Flair win it back, before. But I think Ric Flair knew the value of him maintaining that champion status throughout Sting's injury, so that when the transition took place, it was that much bigger. We've talked about that a little here, even with Nick Aldis, like you talking about transitional champions and things like that. I think sometimes they're necessary, but I think Ric Flair was smart enough to know that in this instance, in order to, because they had been, as we mentioned, they've been working this story for years, and they've been building it up through other feuds and through, them unifying in the Four Horsemen together, and then the split, and then to not have the payoff be Sting is the one that takes the belt off of him in that title reign. It would have diminished it a little bit. Maybe not historically looking back on it. Maybe we'd still be looking at it the same. But at the time, I think Ric Flair was smart enough to know, I've got to keep this title until Sting can come back and take it, because it's not going to have the same prestige if there's 3 title changes while Sting's sitting on the bench. It's going to devalue that title over time, and it's not going to be as big a deal.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the setup for the main event of Great American Bash 90, folks. I mean, that's it. That's going to get you right there to Sting making his comeback and him facing off against Ric Flair in the main event for the World's Heavyweight Championship. This is going to go on to be a match that, for the record, is a 3 3/4 star match from the Wrestling Observer, I think, cagematch.com or .net. I mean, had it at like a 7.46 or something. So it's like a 7.5 out of 10. Pretty highly praised, I think. And, but we'll get there. We'll talk about the match more in detail at that time. But it's a stacked card, man. I'm excited to watch it with everybody tomorrow. You get to see the debut of Big Van Vader. I heard some stories about that one I want to dig into with like Cactus Jack and stuff like that on his way out during that time. And I think each of these matches probably have a little bit of a story behind them. I actually remember this pay-per-view most of all because I remember the Midnight Express in it. And I just I don't know why like that. This match stood out to me, but I remembered it, seeing it way later than when it debuted. But I remember going back when I would hear about the Midnight Express, and this being one of the matches I watched with the Southern boys, and be like, man, the Midnight Express is kind of cool. Like they're pretty good. And then with Jim Cornette, like it was just an excellent combo. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. The dudes with attitude are in this. How can you beat that? Just dudes with attitude. El Gigante. Nothing on that. No, nobody. Out there. I used to think he was like the coolest thing when I was a kid, and I would see like clips of his. I was like, that guy is massive. As I recall, he'll stay out most of this match, and for good reason. But
yeah, I mean, he had a little run before, and he was big, man, and he's a big dude. Very nice. I actually got to meet him before he passed away tragically, you know. But dudes with attitude, man, that was the Sting's answer to the Horsemen. You had Paul Orndorff, you had the JYD, you know, in that thing, and I mean, it was cool at the time. It was cool, and there, JYD had been a year or two removed from having a little run against Flair, and he had a lot of momentum and stuff. So legendary. Well, I won't say the faction was legendary, but it was made up of legends plus El Gigante, you know.
Yeah, but I think it was cool to get the context here, the Sting and Flair rivalry most of all, because this is like one of the most rivalries. I mean, this is a rivalry that you'll see go on to, I mean, on the last episode of WCW Nitro, Flair came back to make sure and wrestle Sting one last time in that show, I remember. And it was just, it was cool to see those guys go at it. I don't know, like they just throughout it all, like it's something you don't get a lot of. Like I feel like you watch a WWE show sometimes right now, and there's no regard for the history of what's happened, and at least through their whole story together, they got to keep that part of it. I think, like it at least wrapped up in that. I don't think maybe they did in TNA. I don't remember because I wasn't watching it, but
there was some interaction. But no, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean, the feud ended there on Nitro. But let me say, just to tie it into the current day, I think that bringing it forward to Nick Aldis and the incredible thing he's done with the World Championship, we're not quite sure yet who that Sting foil is to him, who his Magnum TA, who his Dusty Rhodes is. Is it Tim Storm? Is it Marty Scurll? Is it James Storm? Is it Eli Drake? We don't know yet. I mean, we're still in the second reign of Nick Aldis. He is at this point. He's at the point now where Flair was at in 1984, 85. So if that should motivate you guys, man. I mean, we've got great stuff ahead of us with Nick Aldis, and we've got long reigns. We've got a bunch of reigns. But have we yet found our modern day Sting, our modern day Magnum TA, our modern day Dusty Rhodes, our modern day Ricky Steamboat to counter the great champion that Nick Aldis is? I don't know. I don't know that we've seen them yet. Maybe we have, but it's fun just to think that we're just getting started with Nick Aldis, and they're providing us with a taste of what we experienced in those days back in those days of summer, man, back in 87, 88, 89, and 90, man, that glorious time.
Well, hey, man, and Nick Aldis is like on the, I mean, personally, I still feel like on the earlier side of this kind of Flair run that we're talking about. Like Flair had many, many years in wrestling, still has years in wrestling. He's still doing it technically, not physically wrestling, but he's still there. You know,
yeah.
So Nick has plenty of ways to go that he could, like you talk about, drop that title and pick it back up for a couple of more reigns, and then before maybe that happens before he meets his Sting down the road.
Right? Yeah. It's Aldis is at now where Flair was at in 1984. So, and you think, where was Flair in 84? Well, he still had 2 or 3 decades to go. So we are in the early days of the importance and the legacy of Nick Aldis. that should motivate all of us who love the NWA and who love the World Heavyweight Championship.
Right. It's reestablishing that legacy. Will, did you have anything else you wanted to add about the prequel to Great American Bash 90?
No, man, I'm excited about watching it with everyone tomorrow night. Just a reminder, we'll get it cranked up around the same time as that other wrestling show, and around 8 o'clock or so, and watch it together, chat in the app, and then we'll cover it on Tuesday night in more detail. But man, it's a stacked card, and I have been working my way through a lot of 90s pay-per-views. This is not one that I've seen recently, so this will be a refresher. I don't know if I've seen this full event since I was a kid watching it on VHS, so this will be a really, really fun time. And we'll be sending out links and stuff, so everyone, if you want to go ahead and download the Cast app, go ahead and download it, get ready, get an account and all that kind of stuff. But we'll be sending out links to join us tomorrow. It's gonna be a good time, man. The doc will be in the chat, and he'll be educating us all throughout and giving us all the context, and so that'll be a lot of fun.
If for nothing
I'll be
else,
making jokes about mullets.
Yeah. Tune in to see Harley Race and Tommy Wildfire Rich, guys. I mean, oh my gosh. Tommy Rich and Harley Race. Are you kidding me? What a card, man.
It's going to be a good time. So, yeah, we'll be going head-to-head with Monday Night Raw. So if you're not into sports entertainment, then you'll want to join us for that on the Cast app. So look that up. It's KAST. It's the Cast app. It's easy to – all you got to do is download it, sign up, and then we'll get you the links tomorrow on where to go to watch this thing. And it'll be a good time. A hot time in the old town tonight. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're watching this and you haven't already. If you got friends who ever use YouTube, or if you enjoy this kind of discussion, send them here. Tell them to subscribe. Get us in front of more people. We want to entertain. We want to raise the NWA family. Hashtag NWA fam. Hashtag gravy cake. Also, don't forget, we've got thenwapod.com launched and ready to go. You can go over there right now and get some hashtag NWA fam merch at cost. Go get that stuff. Show the NWA that you love them. We're all just representing. We want to make sure that this thing, that when they decide they're ready to go again, we're ready for them. And also, don't forget that we have the contest going, that if you just go over there right now and just scroll down to the bottom there, you can enter your email address and you're automatically entered to win a free piece of merchandise, whatever you want. We'll just give it to you. So go do that. Go sign up right now on the email list. And if you like us and you want to do anything more, you can buy us a beer with the one-time donation. Thank you to everybody who's donated. Thank you to everybody who's placed an order so far. We are grateful to you guys. Guys, anything else you want to talk about before we wrap this thing up for the evening?
No, man, I'll just give a shout out to WWE Front Row. Became a monthly supporter of the show tonight, so shout out to him. We put him over earlier. Definitely a pivotal part of the hashtag NWA fam. But that monthly support is going to help us drastically enrich the content that we're going to be bringing you guys, and create just a bigger platform for the National Wrestling Alliance, which is all we're trying to do here. So thank you to WWE Front Row, anyone else who has made a contribution. We really, really appreciate it.
It helps us look better to our wives, so that they're not just like, you guys are dorks sitting in a room talking to each other and nobody cares. Nobody's listening. And,
now we're dorks with t-shirts. So there's a difference.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, Chad, thank you so much for all the information you dropped in the chat. James Lawrence, as always, thank you. It's a pleasure, sir. And we will be back on Monday for not here. We'll be on the Cast app Monday night to watch Great American Bash. Of course, you have time to watch the Great American Bash like a week. If you can't make it with us, you can always watch the thing. And we're going to talk about it on Tuesday. We're going to be talking about the actual Great American Bash on the actual 30th anniversary. So we'll give you a week to watch it in case you can't join us on Monday. That's just the time we can all get together. And thanks, Wowza Woman, for the congrats on 300 subscribers. Yeah, we've been moving up slowly but surely. We're working our way up. And yeah, so guys, watch the Great American Bash, even if not with us. Watch it and come show up on the next Tuesday. But also, we'll be back this Tuesday at 8:30ish, usually, always. Until then, Will, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, at Hey It's Will on Twitter and Instagram. Trying to ramp up the Instagram NWA fam. So if you are on Instagram and active, going to be doing some live chats and things over there in the coming weeks. So make sure you go follow me over there and let's connect. I'm on TikTok at Real Hey It's Will, and just trying to give some daily wrestling news over on that platform. And then obviously, Hey It's Will Daily. Keep tuning in every day for the hashtag NWA fam stories. A lot of really great stories are going to be coming out this week that have been submitted to me over the weekend. So stay tuned for that.
Good deal. You can find me on Twitter at rstinson4. I am on Instagram at Robert Stinson or RD Stinson4. Let's see. We put all of our content now on This Is The NWA Podcast on YouTube. So, I've got some stuff on Stinson Vision, but I'm really trying to discipline my posting, and I get confused. I'm a little bit older. So put it all on that. You can find me on MySpace at Tom.
Stop
it.
There we go. That's what I was sitting here waiting for.
I'm not yet on the Tic Tacs.
Got him. Got him with the Tic Tac.
Sucker me in, man. You sucker me in.
That's why I was just sitting here, just like anticipating. I was like,
Now,
don't leave us hanging.
Our Stinson4 on Twitter is what I'm primarily on, guys. But any
not our Stinson4 on Instagram, because there is an R Stinson4, but it's RD Stinson4 on Instagram.
Yes.
And I keep tagging an R Stinson4, and that poor guy. I don't
know.
Why?
I was late to the Instagram game, man. I hadn't gotten on Snack Shack yet either, man. Snack Shack is cool. Anyway, primarily Twitter is my main conduit of communication. You can personal message me if you want information on the shop. If you want whatever, you can reach out to me there. If you want to, be a guest on Piper's Notes, we'd love to have super fans. We get pro wrestlers, rock stars, and super fans on our show, and we'd love to have anybody. So just personal message me, but you can find us at the NWA Pod. That's where our home is at. And so thank you for your support, and I look forward to the follows and the subscribes and all that stuff. So.
Well, I am at This Is Gary Horn on all of the social media stuff. And as always, the podcast is at the NWA Pod. So you guys got to check that out. If you're not already following us, please do subscribe, do all the stuff. Tell your friends about us. That's the big one. If you're feeling really froggy, go over to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Hit subscribe there. Maybe give us a 5-star review. That would be really sweet. But the main thing, just tell your friends. Just tell your friends about us. And let's build this community together. Hashtag NWA fam. We love you guys, and we appreciate every single one of you who shows up in the chat. You guys are awesome, and it makes these shows a lot better when you contribute your knowledge and your information. That's what this is all about, man. The live shows are about the interaction with the community and the hashtag NWA fam. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up for now. Thank you guys so much for all of that. And until next time, enjoy your